Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Adrienne Robert. Adrienne Robert was born on January 4, 1983, in Brunswick, Maine. She graduated from Leavitt High School in Maine in 2001 and the University of Maine at Augusta in 2005. 2 years later, in 2007, she relocated from Maine to Clearwater, Florida. Those who knew her described Adrienne as a beautiful, kind person, always happy and vibrant. At the time of her disappearance, Adrienne was in a relationship with her boyfriend, Justin, and they were planning to start a life together. She was renting a house with her friend Jay. As their relationship progressed, Adrienne and Justin found a new house in July 2012, where they intended to move in together. On the evening of July 13, 2012, Adrienne decided to throw a goodbye party before moving out. Adrienne told Justin that she and Jay would be going out to a movie or a bar. Justin couldn't join them because he was busy with some other things. He didn't object to Adrienne spending the evening with Jay, as they were close friends. Initially, Adrienne and Jay celebrated at home, reminiscing about good times and having a few drinks. Later, they decided to continue the night out and went to the Diamond Doll strip club. Jay called 911 at 3:34 a.m. to report that he had found his roommate, Adrienne, unresponsive. He told the operator that they had been at a nightclub earlier, but Adrienne had left before him. When Jay arrived home, he discovered Adrienne on the bathroom floor, her eyes open but not breathing. There were also signs of a struggle, suggesting a crime had taken place. The 911 operator instructed Jay to focus and perform CPR on Adrienne, guiding him through the process. Jay followed the instructions, attempting to revive Adrienne until the paramedics arrived. Unfortunately, by the time the ambulance arrived, Adrienne was deceased, and the medics were unable to help her. She was pronounced dead at the scene. The police investigation aimed to answer two key questions: who was responsible for Adrienne's death, and was her roommate involved? The police began by thoroughly searching the house, checking every closet and under every bed to ensure the perpetrator was not hiding inside. Detectives and forensic experts observed that there were no signs of forced entry on the front door when they first arrived at the crime scene. Adrienne's body was found on the bathroom floor, wearing only a bra. A stab wound to the chest was the cause of death. The signs of a struggle in the bathroom suggested that Adrienne had tried to defend herself, leading detectives to suspect that the killer was a man. The detectives had to wait for the autopsy results to get more information. While searching Adrienne's bedroom, they noticed that someone had cut off a piece of her bed sheet. It seemed like the killer was trying to destroy evidence, possibly to eliminate any DNA they may have left behind. However, it was puzzling that the killer didn't take the entire sheet, as the remaining part could still contain DNA. Further investigation revealed a substance similar to seminal fluid on the sheet, which was sent to the lab for analysis. Additionally, Adrienne's car was missing from the parking lot next to her house, suggesting that the killer may have stolen it. The police launched an investigation into the crime, searching for potential witnesses and issuing an alert for the victim's car. To piece together the events surrounding Adrienne's death, detectives needed to gather as much information as possible about her final hours. Before proceeding, however, they had to break the devastating news to her family. Adrienne's parents were stunned by the revelation, struggling to come to terms with the loss of their beloved daughter. Justin discovered the shocking truth the morning after, when he saw police surrounding her house. He immediately sensed something was terribly wrong. The detectives then broke the devastating news: Adrienne had been killed the previous night. Given that perpetrators often return to the crime scene, and Justin's close relationship with Adrienne, the detectives felt compelled to investigate him as a potential suspect. In cases like this, it's standard procedure to investigate the people closest to the victim first. Later that day, police found Adrienne's car abandoned just a few blocks away from her house, with the headlights still on and the keys in the ignition. This discovery further supported the investigators' initial theory that the killer had likely used Adrienne's car to escape the crime scene. Forensic experts thoroughly searched the interior of Adrienne's car for any clues that could help crack the case. Meanwhile, investigators reviewed the CCTV footage to identify the person who was driving the car. Although there were no cameras at the exact location where the police found the car, neighboring buildings had cameras that captured footage of the area. After examining the recordings, investigators spotted a man wearing shorts, a baseball cap, and long hair. The man was seen walking away from Adrienne's car around the same time the 911 call was made. He was heading in the opposite direction, which made it essential for investigators to track his next move. Unfortunately, their attempt to follow him was thwarted when they discovered that he turned a corner where there was no surveillance camera. The investigators rewatched the footage multiple times, hoping to pick up on a detail they might have missed initially. The police had difficulty gathering clear information about the man in the recording because it was taken at night. However, interviewing witnesses provided new leads. A neighbor reported seeing Adrienne and a man running past his house on the sidewalk at night. This was unusual for two reasons. It was late, and they didn't appear to be going for a run. Adrienne was wearing a dress and holding her shoes, while the man was not dressed in athletic attire. Although the situation seemed suspicious, Adrienne didn't appear to be in distress, as she wasn't screaming or calling for help. As a result, the neighbor didn't think much of the incident at the time. To reconstruct the events leading up to the 911 call, investigators spoke with Adrienne's roommate, Jay. Jay had gone to the club with Adrienne and claimed to have found her on the bathroom floor. During questioning, Jay told the detective that he and Adrienne had a few drinks at home before heading to Diamond Dolls, a club they often visited to unwind and escape their daily problems. Jay told investigators that he and Adrienne walked to Diamond Dolls because they had been drinking and didn't want to drive. The police focused on the club because it attracted a questionable crowd. Jay claimed they arrived around 10:30 p.m. and stayed for several hours. While they were sitting at a table, a stranger with a beard and a baseball cap joined them. Later, Adrienne decided to leave, and Jay said he stayed behind. He noticed the stranger had also left. To verify Jay's story, investigators reviewed the club's surveillance footage. They found a camera with a wide angle that recorded everyone entering and leaving the club that evening. The footage showed Jay and Adrienne arriving at the club, appearing calm and normal. Another camera at the entrance provided a clear view of people's faces and clothing. CCTV footage confirmed Jay's account of events. It shows him leaving the club alone at 2:53 a.m. and walking towards his house. The footage also reveals that Adrienne left the club earlier, at 1:38 a.m. Notably, she was seen wearing a dress and what appeared to be a jacket when she arrived at the club, but only wore the dress when leaving. This discrepancy raises a key point. Shortly after Adrienne departed, a man wearing a baseball cap rushed out of the club, presumably to return the jacket she had left behind. After returning the jacket, the man and Adrienne appeared to be engaged in conversation. The exact topic of their discussion remains unclear. Rather than returning to the club, the man followed Adrienne. After exiting the parking lot, they turned right onto a relatively isolated street with few houses. It is unclear whether Adrienne felt threatened or uneasy at this point, and this may remain uncertain. After reviewing the evidence, investigators determined that the man seen on camera at the club and the man near Adrienne's abandoned car were two different individuals. Based on the circumstances surrounding her death, they believed the man from the club's CCTV footage was the likely culprit. The other man may have been an innocent bystander. The police were exploring all possible scenarios to provide answers to Adrienne's parents as soon as possible. Adrienne's family traveled to Florida to collect her belongings. Investigators met with her parents, Mark and Dolores, and assured them that they would do everything possible to find and bring the perpetrator to justice. According to her parents, Adrienne was a friendly person with no known enemies. She had a good relationship with her boyfriend, Justin, and her roommate, Jay. Investigators suspected that Adrienne did not know her killer. The laboratory report soon arrived, revealing that male DNA was found on the sheet, Adrienne's body, and the walls. Although the killer had attempted to destroy evidence by cutting out part of the sheet, forensic experts were still able to recover the DNA. However, when the investigators compared the DNA to the database, they were disappointed to find no matches. As a result, the police had the DNA of an unknown suspect in CCTV footage from the club where Adrienne spent her last evening. Detectives focused on the footage as the key to solving the case. They re-examined the recordings, this time reviewing both daytime and nighttime footage, which led to a breakthrough. Approximately 8 hours before Adrienne's death, investigators spotted the same man who had been talking to Adrienne in the parking lot and had left with her. This time, they got a clearer view of his face. To determine how the unknown man arrived at the club, investigators reviewed the footage and saw that he had taken a taxi. The taxi's phone number was visible on the recording, making it easy to identify the taxi company. This new information made it simpler to identify the man. Detectives discovered that the phone number that ordered the taxi was caught on footage near Diamond Dolls, and it belonged to Thomas Frederick. By comparing his driver's license photo with the image of the man on the CCTV footage, detectives confirmed that it was the same person. As a result, Thomas Frederick became the primary suspect in the case. The police required concrete evidence to arrest Frederick, but the surveillance footage alone was insufficient. To gather more evidence without alerting him, they began secretly monitoring his activities. Their goal was to obtain his DNA sample discreetly, as they were concerned that approaching him directly might scare him off. For a week and a half, the officers tracked Frederick's movements, following him to work and keeping a watchful eye on his home at night. Their patience eventually paid off when Frederick discarded a cigarette butt on the road. The officers collected the butt and sent it to a laboratory for DNA analysis. The purpose of the test was to determine if Frederick's DNA matched the samples found at the residence of Adrienne Robert. While waiting for the test results, the police continued to secretly monitor Frederick, as they suspected he might attempt to leave the state at any moment. After receiving the laboratory report, everyone's anticipation was met with an unsurprising conclusion. The DNA analysis revealed that the samples found on the sheet, walls, and Adrienne's body all belonged to Thomas Frederick. As a result, the police arrested and brought him in for questioning. During the interrogation, Frederick claimed to be a frequent visitor to various clubs and bars, where he would often meet new people. When shown a picture of Adrienne, he stated that they had met at Diamond Dolls, where she had bought him a drink and they had danced and talked. However, when the police confronted him with CCTV footage that contradicted his alibi, he changed his story. Frederick then claimed that he and Adrienne had walked together to the end of the street before parting ways. When asked if he had ever visited Adrienne's house, Frederick responded that he couldn't remember due to his intoxication. This inconsistency cast doubt on his entire account, leaving it unclear what he was trying to conceal. The man initially claimed he had no recollection of being at Adrienne's house. However, it was revealed that a witness had seen Adrienne running barefoot while the man chased after her, which suggested that he was lying. When questioned by the investigators, Frederick provided an explanation. He claimed that Adrienne asked him to escort her home and that she began running suddenly after deciding she was in a hurry. She took off her shoes, prompting him to chase after her in order to stay by her side. Despite Frederick's shifting story, detectives uncovered compelling evidence. A DNA test showed that Frederick's DNA was on Adrienne's sheet and numerous items throughout her home. Frederick altered his story after receiving the DNA test results. Now he's claiming self-defense when confronted about his inconsistent explanations. Suddenly remembering past events he couldn't previously recall, Frederick finally shared an apparently factual narrative about how things actually occurred. They spent an intimate time in Adrienne's home where things ultimately became grim and both engaged. A confrontation between Adrienne and Thomas Frederick turned violent and resulted in a physical fight. During the altercation, Adrienne pulled out a knife and threatened Frederick, who then defended himself. Unfortunately, Adrienne was fatally injured in the process. After the incident, Frederick panicked and fled the scene instead of calling for emergency assistance. He feared being blamed for Adrienne's death. As a result, Frederick was charged with first-degree deprivation of life and appeared in court in January 2014. During the trial, the prosecutor presented a different account of the events. According to the prosecution, Adrienne and her friend Jay had been drinking at home before heading to Diamond Dolls, where they met Frederick. The three of them socialized and chatted casually. However, the next day, Adrienne decided to leave the club early to move into her new home with her partner, Justin. Frederick allegedly took advantage of the situation and followed her, despite her attempts to evade him. He chased her to her home, broke in, and attacked her with a knife from the kitchen. The prosecutor stated that the injuries on Adrienne's body suggested that she was forced to have intercourse with Frederick. Fearing she would report him to the police, Frederick decided to kill her. In an attempt to cover his tracks, he cut out a portion of the sheet where his semen had stained, but this effort was unsuccessful. The police were still able to find his DNA on multiple surfaces, including Adrienne's body. Frederick then took Adrienne's car keys, drove a short distance, and abandoned the vehicle. During the medical examiner's testimony, Adrienne's parents, Mark and Dolores Robert, left the courtroom, unable to bear the details of their daughter's final moments. Mark Robert later explained, "I didn't want to hear that. It won't bring Adrienne back, and I didn't want to know what she endured." It was clear that Adrienne had put up a fierce struggle. Her parents have since struggled to cope with life without their daughter. The grieving family member acknowledged that the healing process would be a long and difficult one. "We're still reeling from the loss of our loved one, and it will take time to recover," Dolores said. "However, we will eventually rebuild our lives, as that's what Adrienne would have wanted. It won't be easy, but we will get through this." During the trial, the defense team attempted to tarnish Adrienne's reputation by claiming that she had invited Thomas Frederick to her home for consensual sex. However, this assertion is baseless and may have been a desperate attempt by the perpetrator to justify his presence at the victim's house. The evidence, however, tells a different story. The presence of DNA points to one person, Thomas Frederick. The defense also claimed that Frederick acted in self-defense. She did sustain a stab wound as he was fighting her. Thomas Frederick was found guilty of first-degree murder and car theft. His claim of self-defense was rejected due to insufficient evidence. Although he was accused of killing Adrienne, there was no evidence to suggest he forced her into a sexual act by threatening her with a knife. Thomas Frederick, 25, was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Adrienne's father expressed relief and satisfaction with the verdict, stating that while it wouldn't bring his daughter back, justice had been served. He found it difficult to remain calm in the presence of the man who murdered his daughter, especially since Frederick showed no remorse or sympathy, even after the verdict was read. Adrienne's parents, Mark and Dolores Robert, were overcome with emotion in the courtroom, but felt a sense of relief and happiness when the verdict was announced. They remembered their daughter, a always happy and lively person whose smile could light up a room, and expressed sadness that they would never see her again. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Aya Hashim. The Hashim family moved to the UK from Lebanon in November 2011, seeking a safer and more promising future. Aya's father, Ismail, wanted his children to have a good education and become valuable member of society. He applied for asylum for himself and his family, and after receiving a residence permit, they settled in Blackburn. Aya was a driven and ambitious young woman with big plans for her life. She was a law student at Salford University. Tragically, her parents' hopes for a better life were shattered when Aya was killed in a senseless act of violence. On May 17, 2020, Aya left her house to go to a nearby supermarket at around 3 p.m. However, she never returned home. About an hour later, Aya's father went out to look for her. Aya's mother searched online and discovered the news that a woman had been shot in their neighborhood. Soon after, Aya's parents received the devastating news that their daughter had been killed in the shooting. Aya was walking on King Street when a car drove by with multiple occupants. One of the individuals in the car fired 2 shots, one of which fatally hit Aya. 19-year-old Aya Hashim was fatally shot on King Street and died the same day despite medical efforts. The police do not think the incident was motivated by racism or religious hatred. Deputy Chief Terry Woods is seeking the public's help in gathering evidence. He asks anyone with dashcam footage or surveillance cameras to come forward if they have recordings of a green Toyota Avensis car or any suspicious activity. According to Deputy Chief Woods, Aya was an innocent bystander who was shopping for her family when she was accidentally caught in the crossfire. The shooting involved a green Toyota Avensis car. Witnesses report that 2 rounds were fired from the vehicle, and sadly, Aya was hit. Later that day, police discovered the Toyota Avensis car involved in the shooting abandoned near the scene of the crime. They also obtained CCTV footage of the incident. The footage shows that at 3:03 p.m. Aya is walking along the sidewalk. The Toyota mentioned earlier drives past her. The rear side window on the left is down. The shooter makes a fatal shot. The bullet goes through her and hits the pole. For ethical reasons, the police did not reveal footage of she falling to the ground. After reviewing the video recording, it's clear that there were at least 2 individuals in the car, the driver and the shooter. Following the shooting, the perpetrators quickly fled the scene and abandoned the vehicle on a nearby street. Within 2 hours, the police located the car and initiated a search for its owner. Aya Hashim was caught in the crossfire of a shooting incident that occurred near Khan's car wash. Following her death, the police launched a massive operation to apprehend the suspects, who had fled the UK, with the assistance of international law enforcement. 8 individuals were initially charged in connection with her death. Aya's death was ultimately determined to be a tragic accident. She was an innocent bystander. The shooting was actually a targeted attack on the owner of Khan's car wash, who was a competitor of Pharaoh Suleiman. It was Suleiman who allegedly hired a hitman to take out Khan, but the bullet mistakenly hit Aya instead. According to the video recording, at the time of the incident, Aya was standing a few feet away from a pole. The first bullet fired missed its intended target and hit something near a man, as evidenced by the splashing water. The key point here is that the shooter made a mistake. The person they aimed at was not the business owner, but rather an employee who was mistaken for Khan. During the second shot, Aya was positioned between the shooter and the employee. The bullet struck her in the left side of her chest, passed through her body, and then hit the pole. The car immediately fled the scene. The car wash owner, Khan, witnessed Aya falling to the ground and rushed to her aid, calling emergency services in the process. He described the events, stating that he had seen the car and the gun, and then the assailant sped away. According to him, they returned and started shooting, aiming the gun at him, which left him confused. To better understand the crime, let's examine the roles of the individuals involved. We'll start with the mastermind, Pharaoh Suleiman. Pharaoh Suleiman was a successful businessman with a loving family. Suleiman owned a thriving tire shop that had gained significant popularity over time. The business provided him with a substantial income, enabling him and his family to live a comfortable life. He was also active on social media, frequently sharing photos of himself driving expensive cars, giving his followers a glimpse into his life. When his business began to decline, he devised a plan to eliminate his competitor, Khan. Despite being a potential suspect due to his motive, Suleiman went ahead with the plan. He enlisted the help of Ayaz Hussein, Zamir Raja, and Anthony Ennis. The perpetrators conducted a surveillance mission the day before the crime, driving near the car wash to inspect the area. Additionally, Abu Bakr Saisha purchased the Toyota used in the crime with money provided by Suleiman. Kashif Manzoor ensured the car was in working condition by performing technical checks and addressing any malfunctions. Uthman Saisha and his girlfriend, Judy Chapman, played a supporting role in the crime. They drove the shooter and driver to the location of the Toyota in their Ford Fiesta and then picked them up after the crime was committed, they abandoning the Toyota on a nearby street. According to the inquest, at 1:14 p.m., Judy Chapman and Uthman Saisha picked up Raja and Ennis from Bolton and drove them 13 miles to Blackburn, where the Toyota was parked. Kashif Manzoor made sure the Toyota was ready as all four men drove to Blackburn. However, when they stopped a couple of miles from the car wash, the Toyota wouldn't start due to a dead battery. Manzoor jumped the battery using another car's battery and some wires. With the car started, Manzoor handed it over to Raja and Ennis, then returned to the service station where Suleiman was waiting, watching from a front row seat to see what would happen. The Toyota approached the corner with its windows rolled down. Ennis and Raja circled the block several times, waiting for the perfect moment to act. They needed to be on the same side of the street as Khan's car wash. Meanwhile, Manzoor and Suleiman were observing the situation unfold. On the fourth pass by the car wash, the Toyota slowed down. Coincidentally, Khan was on the street at that exact moment. However, the shooter, Zamir Raja, made a mistake and fired the first shot at a different employee, not Khan. Fortunately, the first bullet missed its target. But the second bullet hit Aya. Following the shooting, Raja and Ennis fled the scene, abandoning their vehicle and getting into a car with Judy Chapman and Uthman Saisha, who drove them away from Blackburn. When police reviewed the video of Suleiman's store, Ayaz Hussein entered the store. Suleiman signaled to the others who were aware of the incident to leave the room and go to the second floor. Abu Bakr Saisha, who had bought the Toyota involved in the crime, was sitting behind them. When Abu Bakr Saisha overheard the police radio mention that the perpetrator's car had been found, he immediately got up to discuss something with Suleiman. 9 days after Aya's murder, Zamir Raja, the shooter, fled to Portugal and met Anthony Ennis, the driver of the Toyota, at Lisbon Airport. Both men had escaped the country. Meanwhile, the police were arresting the individuals involved in the crime. Pharaoh Suleiman, the mastermind, was arrested on May 18, the day after Aya's murder. Abu Bakr Saisha was arrested on May 19, and Judy Chapman and Uthman Saisha were arrested on May 20. Ayaz Hussein and Kashif Manzoor were arrested on May 21. Zamir Raja, who had hoped to return to England without being detected, was arrested at a London train station on June 6. Anthony Ennis was caught in Spain on July 4 and extradited to the UK. Aya Hashim was murdered and Khan, the owner of a car wash, was nearly killed in a violent crime. Several suspects were charged, and at first, all of them denied any involvement. However, as the investigation continued and the pressure mounted, their stories began to contradict each other as they tried to downplay their roles in the crime. As the suspects' testimonies became more inconsistent, they started to turn on each other, revealing crucial details about the crime to the police. Each suspect tried to avoid a long prison sentence by blaming the others. On August 5, 2021, the court delivered its verdicts, resulting in severe sentences for all those involved. Pharaoh Solon, who had a prior conviction for a fatal hit-and-run incident in 2001, received a life sentence with a minimum term of 34 years. Raja, the shooter, was also given a life sentence with a minimum term of 34 years. According to reports, he was paid $500 for his involvement in the crime. The driver, Anthony Ennis, was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 33 years. Ayaz Hussein, who orchestrated the crime, received a life sentence with a minimum term of 32 years. Abu Bakr Saisha, who bought the getaway car, will serve at least 28 years. Uthman Satatya, who arranged for the shooter and driver to be transported, will also serve at least 28 years, and Kashif Manzoor, who made sure the car was working on the day of the crime, will serve at least 27 years. The judge was critical of the defendants, stating that they showed no regret for their actions after the shooting. Instead of taking responsibility, they tried to deceive and manipulate their way out of trouble. When that failed, they turned on each other in an attempt to save themselves. Judy Chapman was found guilty in October 2021 of involuntary deprivation of life. She was given a 15-year prison sentence for driving the car involved in the crime. However, investigators have since discovered that other individuals were involved in the crime. This was revealed through analysis of communication between the convicted parties. Louis Otway, a 42-year-old from Manchester, was sentenced to life in prison on May 5, 2023, with a minimum term of 32 years. During his trial, evidence revealed that Otway acted as an intermediary between Ayaz Hussein, Zamir Raja, and Anthony Ennis. Specifically, he assisted Hussein in committing a crime. Another person, Banbridge, was also involved in the case. She was the 10th person to be found guilty. Prosecutors said that Banbridge met with Raja and Ennis in Bolton, took their phones, and turned them off. Then, she drove to Trafford and turned the phones back on in different locations, making it seem like Raja and Ennis were in Greater Manchester, not Blackburn, when a shooting happened. This was done to create a fake alibi for the two men. Banbridge, 32, admitted to conspiracy to pervert the course of justice and was sentenced to 23 months in prison on August 11, 2023. This was the last conviction in the case of Aya Hashim. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jennifer Londano. Jennifer Londano, a 31-year-old engaged and responsible individual, failed to arrive at her job in Englewood, New Jersey, prompting concerns from her family and friends. As the manager of the newly opened Luna Lounge on Armory Street, Jennifer was a diligent worker with a spotless attendance record. However, on June 25, 2017, she vanished without a trace after closing the bar in the early morning hours. When she didn't show up for her shift that evening, her co-workers grew worried and attempted to contact her. But her phone was switched off, which was unusual because she always maintained regular communication with them. This lack of response heightening their anxiety, her loved ones decided to file a missing person report with the police, highlighting that she always checked in with them before going anywhere. As the investigation began, police visited Jennifer's apartment, where she lived alone. The officers found the front door locked with no signs of forced entry or damage. Upon entering the apartment, they initially noticed nothing out of the ordinary. The space was clean and well-maintained, with no signs of disarray or theft. At first glance, nothing suggested that the apartment was a crime scene. After investigating Jennifer's apartment and finding no leads, the police visited the bar where she worked as a manager to gather more information. They spoke with the staff at the establishment and discovered that Jennifer was well-liked by everyone, with no reported conflicts with patrons or employees. Her co-workers described her as kind, helpful, and highly respected. Jennifer was a driven and ambitious person who had a strong work ethic. In 2016, she partnered with 40-year-old Rafael Lolos to open the Luna Lounge in Englewood, New Jersey. The bar was successful, thanks in part to Jennifer's exceptional people skills and management abilities. Lolos provided the financial backing, while Jennifer was the face of the business, charming customers with her warm personality. What the police discovered during their conversation with the bar staff was that Jennifer and Rafael's relationship went beyond business. They were romantically involved, and their relationship was public knowledge. Despite their close relationship, they had not yet taken the step of living together. The investigation revealed that on the morning Jennifer was last seen, she had closed the bar and gotten into Rafael's car, which was waiting for her after work. As the last person to see her, Rafael became a key person of interest, and the detectives decided to bring him in for questioning. Rafael claimed that he drove Jennifer home from work after she closed the bar, and they spent some time together at her apartment before he left to let her rest for her shift that evening. Following her disappearance, Rafael maintained contact with Jennifer's family and collaborated with them to try to determine her whereabouts. Since there was no apparent connection between Rafael and Jennifer's disappearance, the police concentrated on investigating other leads. However, they faced challenges due to Jennifer's phone being turned off on the day she disappeared, with the last signal coming from a cell tower near her home. Neighborhood interviews yielded no suspicious information. As part of the investigation, the police requested banking records, as they often provide crucial clues in such cases. When the bank shared the data, it revealed an unexpected development: Jennifer's bank card had been used even after she went missing. The investigation led detectives to suspect that Jennifer was intentionally hiding, but her family strongly disagreed, convinced that she would never willingly cause them distress. To gather more information, the police began to investigate the activity on her card, seeking to determine when, where, and how it was used. 2 days after Jennifer's disappearance, on June 27th, a pedestrian walking along Pier 44 in Brooklyn noticed something unusual in the water. The person stared at the object for a while, unable to identify it, before realizing with shock that it was a human body, or at least part of one. The police were summoned to the scene, and the pier was sealed off. A thorough search by divers yielded no additional body parts or evidence. The police faced a daunting challenge in identifying the victim, but a potential lead emerged. A tattoo was discovered on the victim's right thigh during a forensic examination. The tattoo, which may have belonged to the victim, was partially translated from Sanskrit, an ancient Indian language with complex grammar. The police released an image of the tattoo, hoping someone would recognize it and provide information. Investigations revealed that the tattoo's inscription was Sanskrit, but incorrectly written. The tattoo artist and the victim seemed to intend to write Liliana, but did so with grammatical errors, suggesting neither of them was familiar with the language. For days after the initial gruesome discovery, police received another disturbing call from a passerby who spotted a leg on the riverbank near 79th Street. Police immediately cordoned off the area and pulled the leg out of the water. The leg, which was intact from the knee down, seemed to match the remains found earlier, leading investigators to believe they belonged to the same person. A notable detail was the pink-painted fingernails on the leg. Despite an extensive search by divers in the area, no other remains or evidence were found. However, forensic analysis soon confirmed that the fragments found were indeed from the same body. Around this time, the police had already identified the victim. A few days after releasing an image of the distinctive tattoo, a woman contacted the police station and revealed that she knew the tattoo's owner. It was Jennifer's mother, Gladys Quintero, who recognized the tattoo on the news and recognized it as belonging to her daughter. The tattoo, it turned out, was a tribute to Jennifer's late aunt and symbolized the name Lily or Liliana. Jennifer's mother to New York to identify human remains. When it was confirmed that the remains were Jennifer's, the family was left shattered. The discovery marked a significant turn in the case, transforming a missing person investigation into a homicide probe. The family was not only grief-stricken by Jennifer's death but also horrified by the brutal circumstances surrounding it. Unfortunately, due to the state of the remains, it was impossible to determine the exact cause of death. Despite an extensive search, the police were unable to recover additional body parts. As family and friends paid their respects to Jennifer at her workplace, the bar, detectives were making progress in their investigation. They tracked down leads on Jennifer's credit card usage. Through a thorough review of security footage and store visits, detectives identified the person who had used Jennifer's credit card, Raphael, Jennifer's boyfriend. They discovered that Raphael had left Jennifer's apartment on the day she disappeared to go shopping. His purchases, made with Jennifer's credit card, included a box of garbage bags and 2 meat cleavers from different stores. Later that evening, he crossed the George Washington Bridge into Manhattan, and his cell phone records placed him near the Hudson River. Raphael went home after leaving Jennifer's apartment and never returned. 2 days later, Jennifer's torso was discovered. The police suspected that Raphael might have killed her and dismembered her body using meat cleavers, a disturbing thought considering their romantic relationship. However, the evidence pointing to Raphael's guilt was mounting. As a result, the police obtained an arrest warrant and a search warrant for his home, anticipating that they would soon apprehend him. Raphael attempted to evade capture by renting a hotel room and paying in cash, but he was quickly tracked down and arrested. He did not resist arrest and denied any involvement in Jennifer's death, claiming that Jennifer had given him her credit card. Raphael continued to insist that Jennifer was fine when he left her, but detectives uncovered more evidence that contradicted his testimony. A search of his home revealed dark red stains in the bathroom, which were later confirmed by a lab test to be Jennifer's dried blood. Detectives investigating Jennifer's disappearance analyzed her communications with Raphael and found a pattern of frequent arguments, typically sparked by jealousy. A search of Raphael's home uncovered a box sent via post office and a bag that had previously contained a GPS tracking device. It became clear that Raphael had secretly installed the device on Jennifer's car, allowing him to monitor her movements. Cell phone data revealed that Raphael had picked Jennifer up from work and taken her to her apartment. Although Jennifer's phone was soon turned off, Raphael's phone remained active. Between 9 p.m. and midnight on the day of her disappearance, his phone sent a signal to a cell tower near the Hudson River. This suggests that Jennifer may have already been dead by then, and Raphael may have driven to the river to dispose of her body. Raphael and Jennifer's relationship was complex and tumultuous, with conflicts often centered on financial issues. Despite their efforts to establish a business together, opening a bar less than a year before her disappearance, their relationship was marked by animosity and blurred boundaries. Raphael's messages to Jennifer were volatile, veering between insults, threats, apologies, and declarations of love, with one notable instance where he referred to her as a gold digger. Jennifer's family was shocked and disbelieving when the man who had claimed to love her and helped search for her became the prime suspect in her murder. Raphael refused to explain himself, denied any wrongdoing, and hired a lawyer. Although police couldn't find the exact knives they knew Raphael had bought, they were able to purchase identical ones from the same store. Forensic analysis later confirmed that these knives were used to harm Jennifer's body. Raphael was subsequently charged with several crimes, including murder, desecration of remains, stalking, hindering apprehension, and credit card fraud. The trial, which began in November 2019, lasted for 2 months. Prosecutors claimed that Jennifer was killed by Raphael in her apartment during a jealous argument. Raphael's lawyers argued that the state had no concrete evidence to prove their claim, pointing out that there were no signs of a struggle in the apartment and no marks in the bathtub where Jennifer was allegedly dismembered. The prosecution countered that the lack of evidence was, in itself, evidence of a cover-up. The absence of any signs of a crime suggested that Raphael had made a deliberate effort to conceal his tracks. The bathtub, in particular, was found to be remarkably clean, with no DNA or physical evidence linking Jennifer to the scene. The prosecutor pointed out that an ordinary person's bathtub would not be as clean as the one in question. During the trial, Jennifer's mother emotionally addressed the judge, stating that the defendant had destroyed her life and her family. She emphasized that Jennifer was her beloved daughter, and the defendant's actions had left her devastated. After reviewing the case, the judge determined that Raphael was consumed by an obsession with Jennifer. When given the opportunity to speak, Raphael refused, only communicating with his lawyer. In December 2019, the jury deliberated for 3 days before finding Raphael guilty on all charges. The verdict was officially announced in February 2020. As a result, 43-year-old Raphael received the maximum sentence, life in prison with the possibility of parole after 63 years. This means he will be 106 years old before he can be considered for parole. Unfortunately, the remainder of Jennifer's body was never found. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Neha Verma. There are many instances that raise concerns about the safety of women, even in the present day. In June 2011, a similar event occurred in the lovely city of India. 3 women were discovered murdered in their residence, and it took the authorities several days to pinpoint the perpetrators. The query persists: who was responsible for this triple homicide, and what drove them to kill these 3 women? Let's delve deeper into the Deshpande family murders case. In 2011, Megha Deshpande, 42 years old, resided in the upscale area of Srinagar in the city of Indore with her 21-year-old daughter, Ashlesha, and her 70-year-old mother, Rohini. It is noteworthy that Indore has repeatedly been ranked as the cleanest city in India. Srinagar is known for its affluent residents, indicating the Deshpande family's strong financial status. Megha Deshpande worked in a multi-level marketing (MLM) company for a considerable period. MLM, also known as network marketing, direct selling, operates by connecting individuals to the company through a network. This system allows for continuous profit generation for the company owner as more people join the network. Before residing in Indore, Megha lived in the city of Ujjain with her husband and the rest of the family, which is about 35 miles away from Indore. However, a few months ago, Megha shifted her home with her daughter and mother. Megha's husband, Nanjay, was a bank manager, so he had to stay in Ujjain. Nanjay was a bank manager, and Megha was a senior employee at an MLM company, so they had no financial worries. Megha's family also had a strong relationship with their neighbors, and all the residents in this community were sensible. So far, there had been no crimes that could cause fear among the people. But something happened in this area on June 13, 2011, which shook the entire city of Indore. During that time, nobody had left Megha's house until noon, and no one's voice was heard. However, suddenly, one of Megha Deshpande's neighbors walked by her house and noticed something very unusual. There were footprints with blood stains around Megha's house. This sight alarmed her, prompting her to quickly call the authorities to investigate Megha's house. After that, the neighbor also knocked on the door of the house several times, but there was no response from inside. Then, they tried to look up inside the house through a window. But upon seeing what was inside, he screamed loudly because he saw 3 women lying on the ground in the house, with blood all around their bodies. After this, in a state of panic, the neighbor quickly informed the police about it. For the police, this case was completely different because such an incident had never happened in the Srinagar area. Now gradually, many people of this society came to know about this incident. And by the time the police reached the crime scene, a large crowd had gathered outside the Deshpande family's house. Then, the police entered the house and were surprised to see the bodies of 3 women who had been brutally murdered by the criminals. They seized the crime scene and began their investigation, discovering 2 bullet shells inside the house. A police officer observed that Mega had been fatally shot in the head, but they could not locate the second bullet, despite thoroughly searching every corner of the house. After this, the police called in the forensic team to start collecting evidence from the crime scene, and then the dead bodies of these 3 women were sent for post-mortem. By this time, not only Srinagar, but the entire city of Indore was shocked with this news. A few hours later, the post-mortem report is presented to the police, revealing that the murders of 21-year-old Asleha and her 70-year-old grandmother Rohini were due to excessive bleeding with multiple stab wounds inflicted on their bodies. This report also makes it clear that only Mega Deshpande was shot to death. But now, the biggest question before the police was if they have found 2 bullet shells, then on whom was the second shot fired? On the other hand, Mega's husband and the general public started demanding a quick solution to the case, so the culprits could be punished. The police felt the increasing pressure from the public and a sense of urgency to solve the case quickly. Consequently, several teams were deployed by the police to investigate. One team examined the call detail records of the victims, while another team rechecked the forensic evidence. At first, the police found out that at the crime scene, there was blood of an additional person besides Mega, Ashlesha, and Rohini, and the police knew it was likely a man. A case of robbery and murder was filed, as it appeared that theft had taken place at the Deshpande family's residence. Later, investigations revealed that there were multiple calls made to Mega's phone from a specific number, and Mega had lengthy conversations with this number. Now the police extracted complete information about this number, from where it was revealed to the police that this number belonged to a girl named Neha Verma. Now the police had also started tracking the location of the girl, so that they could talk to her regarding this case, which might provide them with some leads. On the other hand, the police now also had a sample of that blood which was separate from Mega, Ashlesha, and Rohini at the crime scene. Then one day, suddenly the police find out that Neha is near an ATM in that area. After that, a team of police reached there and brought Neha to the police station to talk to her. Now Neha was told about the entire scene, which left Neha completely astonished. After that, Neha explained how she met Mega. Mega and Neha met for the first time in a shopping mall. Neha accidentally bumped into Mega while rushing through the mall. Mega was holding some items in her hand, which fell down due to the collision. Neha then apologized and helped Mega pick up the fallen items. During this time, there was a lot of conversation between them, so much so that Neha herself went to drop Mega to the car, and from here onwards, their friendship started. Neha discovered that Mega works at a company involved in multi-level marketing, MLM. They exchanged phone numbers the same day and started talking occasionally. Neha was curious about the MLM business model, so she would discuss it with Mega. However, the police became suspicious of Neha's story because her words and body language didn't align. As a result, they questioned Neha extensively. Neha tried to conceal her lie briefly, but she couldn't withstand the police interrogation for long. Eventually, she confessed a story that shocked even the police. Neha, a 23-year-old, was beautiful and cheerful. Although she was a beautician, her financial situation wasn't good enough for her to fulfill her dreams. Neha's father was an ordinary van driver, which meant their financial condition wasn't great enough for Neha to pursue her dreams. It was during this time that Neha met a guy named Rahul Chaudhary. They developed a good friendship, which eventually turned into love. Rahul, at 24, was handsome, but his financial situation was the same as Neha's. Despite this, they loved each other deeply and wanted to marry, so they were searching for a way to become rich overnight and live their lives comfortably. One day, Neha met Mega. Mega had a fondness for wearing expensive jewelry, so whenever she went out, she adorned herself with her jewels. The day Mega met Neha for the first time, She was decked out in gold jewelry, which indicated to Neha that Megha was very wealthy, sparking the idea in Neha's mind to get close to Megha Deshpande and befriend her. Subsequently, Neha deliberately bumped into Megha to strike up a conversation, and thus their interactions began. Now, gradually, due to talking through a call, the thought of robbing Megha came into Neha's mind. After this, Neha included her boyfriend Rahul in her plan. She told Rahul that she has conversations with a woman who is very wealthy, and the added advantage is that there are no men in her house, so it will be easy to rob her. Hearing this idea, Rahul also becomes happy because by doing this, both of their financial situations would improve. And then they could live comfortably after getting married. From that day on, Rahul began to plan the murders of these three women. He believed that if he successfully killed them without anyone finding out, there would be no one to report them. With a complete plan in place, Rahul only needed a gun to carry out the deed. His friend Manoj, who was close to both Rahul and Neha, provided him with one, as he also had a gun. With the means to execute his plan, Rahul started searching for the right day to make his move against Megha and her family. On June 13, 2011, Neha contacted Megha to join her MLM scheme. Megha was pleased to have Neha on board. Unbeknownst to Megha, this day would bring unforeseen tragedy. Neha arrived at Megha's house early the next morning. Megha asked Neha to fill out a form for the company, but Neha was unsure about the required information. She requested help from her friend and Megha approved. Neha then contacted her boyfriend, Rahul. Now, according to the plan, Rahul and Manoj were waiting for Neha's call, and then shortly after that, Rahul and Manoj went to Megha's house. But as soon as Rahul entered the house, he showed Megha a gun, and then, a few seconds later, he shot Megha, causing her to die on the spot. The sound of the gunshot didn't go out of their house, because Rahul had shot very close, but the sound of this gunshot reached Ashlesha and Rohini's ears, causing both of them to run into the lobby. After that, first Rahul and Manoj frightened Ashlesha and Rohini and asked for her ATM card and PIN to save their lives. In order to save her life, Ashlesha quickly gave her ATM card and handed it to Rahul. She felt that now these people would leave. But now, because Ashlesha and her grandmother had seen Neha, Rahul, and Manoj's faces, so now these three were afraid that after they leave, these two might inform the police. So Rahul first tried to shoot Ashlesha, but in haste, this bullet hit Rahul's own foot. Afterwards, Manoj brutally murdered Ashlesha and elderly Rohini with a knife. Afterwards, these three criminals stole 1,000 Indian rupees, valuable jewelry worth up to 500,000 Indian rupees, and Ash's ATM card before leaving the house. Surprisingly, it was the same ATM card Neha was planning to withdraw money from, but she was later caught by the police. Rahul was captured after going to a police station with a fake first information report, and then being hospitalized locally due to a gunshot wound in his foot. Nonetheless, when the police compared Rahul's blood sample taken from the crime scene with his own, it was a match. The police quickly solved this case and captured the criminals, resulting in much praise for their city's police force. Subsequently, this case remained in court for a long time, but eventually, in December 2013, the district court sentenced these three criminals to death by hanging. These killers had wiped out the entire Deshpande family line by murdering women from 3 different generations. Moreover, the police found bloodied clothes, knives, and jewelry in possession of these criminals. Neha Verma is currently incarcerated in the central jail, where she is teaching a beauty parlor course to other female inmates. It should also be noted that this was the first time the district court had pronounced capital punishment for a woman. Megha's husband, Nanai Deshpande, expressed satisfaction with the court's decision and said he had full confidence in the judiciary, and the police did a great job. The aspiration to become rich overnight turned an ordinary girl and boy into criminals. If these criminals had fled to another country after killing and stealing money, they might never have been caught. However, if Megha hadn't worn her valuable jewelry to the mall that day and hadn't trusted a random person, perhaps her family would still be alive today. One lesson to be learned from this is that we shouldn't develop such strong friendships with any stranger in just a few days, that we start inviting them home. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Dupont de Ligonnès. In early April 2011, the shutters of house number 55 on Boulevard Robert Schumann in Nantes, France, remained closed for the first time in years. This was unusual because the house, which belonged to the Dupont de Ligonnès family, was typically filled with the sounds of the family's 4 teenage children and their 2 dogs. The family consisted of Xavier, his wife Agnes, and their children. The neighbors, who were accustomed to seeing the shutters open even when the family was on vacation, noticed the unusual silence and alerted the local police, fearing something might have happened to the family. During the initial police inspections, no signs of the Dupont de Ligonnès family were found. However, on the 5th inspection, a horrific discovery was made. Xavier Dupont de Ligonnès was born on March 9, 1961, in Versailles, a western suburb of Paris. He was the eldest son of French Count Bernard Hubert Dupont de Ligonnès and his wife Geneviève Tertz. The family also had a daughter named Christine, born in 1966. When Bernard deserted his wife for a mistress, Xavier took on a leadership role in his family, caring for his mother and sister. Christine began to claim she received divine messages, which she transcribed during automatic writing sessions, similar to those of a surrealist poet. Her unusual beliefs gradually evolved into doomsday sermons, leading her to establish a cult called the Church of Philadelphia. This group attracted members of the aristocracy, whom Geneviève convinced were chosen to survive the impending apocalypse and participate in the world's rebirth. According to Geneviève, Christine was destined to give birth to the Savior, a child who would be the reincarnation of both Jesus and Satan, and thus bring salvation. Although Xavier inherited his father's noble title, he showed little interest in French traditions, instead being captivated by luxury, high-performance cars, and eccentricities. He also greatly admired the United States. Geneviève financially supported Xavier's extravagant lifestyle through significant donations from cult members, who were sworn to secrecy about their activities. On the beautiful island of Bréhat in 1974, Xavier formed a strong and lasting bond with Emmanuel Teneur. The 2 boys developed a deep, mutual understanding that continued throughout their lives. Although Emmanuel confessed his love for Xavier, which was rejected, their close friendship remained unaffected. 2 years later, Xavier met Agnès Honer, born on November 9, 1962, in Neuilly-sur-Seine, near Paris. Agnès was deeply devoted to her religion and worked as an assistant at the Blanche de Castille Catholic School in Nanterre, where she taught catechism. While little is known about her family, it is well documented that Xavier and Agnès developed a close relationship, which led to a brief but passionate romance before they eventually parted ways. In 1990, Agnès gave birth to her first child, Arthur, from a casual relationship. Soon after, she and Xavier rekindled their romance and decided to tie the knot. Xavier adopted Arthur as his own son, and 2 years later, they welcomed their first biological son, Thomas, who would carry on the family name. To mark the occasion, Xavier chose Emmanuel as Thomas's godfather. The couple went on to have 2 more children, Anne and Benoit. The family of 6 seemed to personify the ideal family unit, with Xavier appearing as a loving father and the children excelling academically, hinting at a bright future. Agnès was devoted to nurturing her children's faith, regularly taking them to Mass. Others perceived her as kind yet firm with her children. Around the year 2000, Xavier relocated his family to the United States, aligning with their individual interests and preferences. Xavier, a charismatic and multilingual individual with a discreet nature, was confident in his ability to blend in seamlessly in the United States. However, this endeavor ended in failure, resulting in substantial financial losses. Upon his return to France, he He began to amass significant debts tied to his professional pursuits, which often seemed shrouded in ambiguity. Multiple investigations have portrayed him as a salesman. According to French media reports, financial struggles had been a persistent concern for Xavier over several years. One of Xavier's unsuccessful ventures was an unusual scheme to import cars from the United States to France. He also launched several small businesses, none of which saw significant success, including a hotel and restaurant guide for sales representatives, a customer loyalty system for restaurants, and an import scheme for cars from the United States to France. He was listed as the manager of the French Federation of Commerce, although the accounts for this enterprise were minimal. In 2003, he hired 6 salespeople to help turn his fortunes around. Xavier's work often took him away from home from Monday to Friday, earning him a meager annual income of around $4,200 in declared earnings. As financial issues began to strain his marriage, typical marital disagreements were likely exacerbated. In 2004, Agnes poured her heart out on a French forum, detailing the challenges she and her husband faced. She revealed that he had once told her that a group death as a family wouldn't be catastrophic, a haunting statement that would linger. By 2009, the mounting debt had severely impacted their relationship, leading to a temporary separation. During this period, Xavier sent numerous letters blaming Agnes for the family's troubles and holding her responsible for their financial ruin. This emotional turmoil took a devastating toll on Agnes, causing her to lose her appetite and struggle with insomnia on numerous occasions. Xavier sought help from his friend Emmanuel, who hailed from a wealthy family and had inherited a substantial fortune from his father. Despite his affluence, Emmanuel lived modestly in a small apartment, preferring to use his wealth to support others. He was an enigmatic and somewhat eccentric individual who never hesitated to lend Xavier significant sums of money. In addition to financial support, Emmanuel funded Xavier's travels and even co-signed for the house where Xavier eventually settled with his family in the late 2000s. Thanks to Emmanuel's generosity, the family resided in a cozy chalet located in the suburbs at 55 Boulevard Robert Schumann, west of N. As they settled in, the neighbors quickly formed the impression that Agnes was domineering and less pleasant than her husband. Behind closed doors, Agnes faced a personal crisis. She saw Xavier as both too fragile and paradoxically too rigid, almost militaristic in his behavior. While he played the role of head of the household, he was emotionally distant, lacking tenderness and affection, and sometimes even abusive. Agnes confided in her Thursday prayer group friends about her fears regarding Genevieve's control over Xavier. She painted her mother-in-law as a mentally unstable mystic, and her concerns ran deep. On January 20th, 2011, Bernard passed away, marking a significant turning point. Given the contrast between his lavish lifestyle and financial struggles, Xavier hoped his father's demise would yield a substantial inheritance. However, he was in for a rude awakening upon reviewing his father's estate, only to find a few papers, a rifle, a card, a ring, and some cash, which he promptly claimed. Within hours of Bernard's passing, Xavier used his father's card to withdraw cash. By February 2nd, he had obtained a firearms license, and by March 12th, he had purchased a silencer for the rifle. During this period, he also acquired quicklime and honed his shooting skills in his garden, targeting a balloon on a stand. When Emmanuel visited, he tried the rifle, unaware of any suspicious intent. Xavier downplayed the silencer, citing concerns about disturbing the neighbors. On Friday, April 1st, the two friends, Bernard and Xavier, visited a shooting range, where Bernard's inherited rifle drew considerable attention. The following day, Emmanuel called Xavier 5 times, and they engaged in a nearly hour-long conversation. The investigation suggests that the horror unfolded on Sunday, April 3rd. That evening, Xavier, Agnes, and their children went to the movies, followed by a pleasant dinner at a restaurant. Everyone was present, except for Thomas, who was studying at a Catholic university and resided in a nearby student hostel. After their night out, The family returned to their chalet, where neighbors caught a glimpse of them, and some family members exchanged text messages with friends and acquaintances. Xavier sent a message to Christine, detailing their dinner outing. The prevailing theory is that Xavier drugged his wife and children, waiting for them to fall asleep before shooting and burying them in the garden. He also killed the family's 2 Labrador dogs. Xavier's alibi was as dubious as his actions. On Monday morning, he began contacting people in his family's social circle from as early as 6 a.m. He phoned Agnes's workplace, claiming she was unwell, and contacted the children's schools, stating that Arthur, Agnes's son from a previous relationship, had been in a motorcycle accident and that Anne and Benoit were ill. By midday, he sent a letter to the restaurant where Arthur worked, announcing Arthur's resignation due to his father's alleged transfer to Australia. There was still Thomas to account for. On the same Monday, April 4th, Xavier met up with Thomas, having dinner with him at a restaurant near his university residence. After the meal, a tired Thomas returned to his room. Thomas received an urgent message from his father the following day, claiming Agnes was in a hospital after a bicycle accident and was in a mild coma. This prompted Thomas to travel immediately. However, it is presumed that Xavier had already killed Thomas, just like he did with his siblings and mother. Later that evening, Emmanuel had a 19-minute conversation with Xavier. At midnight, a friend of Thomas received a message from him, stating he was watching a movie with his father at home. But by then, Thomas was likely already dead. About an hour later, Xavier sent an email to Emmanuel, arranging to meet soon. Emmanuel replied, reminding Xavier that he had power of attorney and that the key was on the sailboat. Instead of trying to hide, Xavier went about his daily routine, going in and out of his house, leaving notes on the door, and withdrawing cash from ATMs. He used his credit cards to pay for meals at restaurants and stayed in hotels under his real name, all while being caught on security cameras. As time passed, neighbors began to notice something was off. The usually open windows of the chalet were closed. The family's 4 children were no longer seen. The dogs had stopped barking, and Agnes hadn't returned to work. It was as if the family had vanished into thin air. Piecing together the strange signs, worried neighbors alerted the authorities. When officers arrived, they found a nearly bare refrigerator containing only a few jars of preserves. In the kitchen, they discovered a still damp mop, and in the living room, a chest sat on the table and guitars lay on the sofa. It seemed as though the Dupont de Leon family had vanished into thin air. The scene was unsettling, with beds stripped of their sheets, picture frames empty, and closets devoid of clothes. Everything hinted at a sudden and mysterious departure. A few days later, on April 9th, a letter emerged, sent to family and friends. The letter claimed that Xavier had been recruited by the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration and that the family had to go into hiding as part of a witness protection program, explaining their sudden disappearance and silence. However, neighbors were skeptical about this story, feeling that something wasn't quite right. They feared for the family's safety and urged the authorities to dig deeper. Xavier drove through southern France in his car as the case continued to attract media attention, leading to the emergence of more details from the past. On April 15th, security cameras recorded Xavier checking into a small hotel near Cannes, where he parked his car, grabbed a bag, and vanished into the nearby woods, marking the last time he was seen. Emmanuel made a surprising call to his mom, revealing secrets like his homosexuality, alcoholism, and depression. When cops searched the house again, they found a freshly disturbed patch of earth. After investigating, they discovered a concrete slab, leading to a grim find. Agnes and her 4 kids, shot and wrapped in bags with religious symbols, buried in burlap sacks with quicklime, along with the family dogs. In the master bedroom, a sleep apnea device was found, last recording at 3:27 a.m. on April 4th. Xavier may have spared Thomas due to his bond with Emmanuel. However, when questioned, Emmanuel's cooperative facade cracked, revealing inconsistencies in his story. 24 hours later, Nantes police searched Emmanuel's apartment, seizing his laptop. He then revealed his knowledge of Xavier's rifle. An examination of the hard drive uncovered emails between Emmanuel and Xavier, including one from April 6th that raised suspicions. Investigators began to suspect Emmanuel's involvement in Xavier's escape. Christine and JVV also faced scrutiny for their evasive answers about Xavier and the Church of Philadelphia. JVV dodged questions about Xavier's childhood and the sect's income, denying its existence. But investigators found a complaint from former members who fled after Christine's proposal to conceive a chosen one through group sex. This revealed the sect's workings, including rich backers. Suspecting support for Xavier, police questioned former members and watched the sect's followers, but found no leads. Authorities tracked Xavier's movements via cell phone records. Last sighting, April 15th, possibly carrying a weapon. Despite searches, no body remains found. Speculation, rescued by boat, taken to another country. International arrest warrant issued May 4th. Police investigated boat ownership but found nothing. On May 9th, Emmanuel was summoned to the Nantes police station for another interview, which had escalated into a grueling interrogation. The police had shifted their focus to finding a sailboat and identifying its captain, but Emmanuel was still oblivious to the magnitude of the investigation or the mounting suspicions against him. When questioned about a sailboat reference, he attributed it to coincidence, explaining that he had granted Xavier power of attorney to access his safe deposit box in case of an emergency. The key, he revealed, was hidden on a model sailboat in an apartment, and the safe contained only his will. The police, still frustrated and empty-handed despite the intriguing coincidences, ultimately released Emmanuel. At this point, the investigation remained shrouded in uncertainty. Emmanuel was viewed as a witness, with no arrests made, and police questioned the need to further interrogate him. However, they decided to apply pressure, given his credibility as an accomplice. A notable detail emerged when investigators found an unusual $4,200 check signed by Emmanuel, linked to a previously unknown Monaco account. Authorities requested account statements, but faced resistance due to Monaco's strict banking privacy laws. September 28th, 4 police officers visited Emmanuel's home. He emerged disoriented, in underwear, barely confirming his identity. His sparse apartment was cluttered with empty bottles, revealing deep loneliness. Emmanuel was tormented by the lack of letters or calls from his friend. The police now viewed him as a lost soul, not a suspect, wondering if they'd followed the wrong lead. Xavier had become one of France's most wanted alleged murderers, possibly even globally renowned. In 2015, a journalist claimed to have received a letter from Xavier, stating he was alive, but the handwriting, DNA, and fingerprint analyses failed to yield any conclusive evidence. On January 9, 2018, police raided a monastery in Rab-Brun-sur-Aron following a tip-off about a monk resembling Xavier, but after an intense 2-hour search, they determined it was a case of mistaken identity. On January 18, 2019, Andual died of a heart attack, and that same year, authorities arrested a man they believed to be Xavier at Glasgow Airport in Scotland, but once again, it proved to be a case of mistaken identity. Another theory proposes that Xavier might be hiding in South America, specifically Argentina, where his linguistic skills and charisma would enable him to seamlessly blend in. Years have passed, and the Church of Philadelphia has not only endured, but reportedly undergone a resurgence. This small, highly secretive group consists of members who have been part of it for nearly 40 years, living as if they have withdrawn from the world. In the summer of 2019, 2 brothers who were raised within the sect filed new complaints against Christine and Gev, claiming that these women fervently preached that Xavier was alive, innocent, and hiding in the United States as part of a witness protection program. They alleged that everything written in the April 9th letter was pure fabrication. Since 2011, the case has been plagued by speculation and false leads, leading authorities down endless dead ends. The pressing question remains: will justice ever be served for Agnes and her children? Despite the bleak outlook, some still believe that the truth will eventually come to light. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Michael Van Eck. Michael Van Eck was born on August 14, 1987, in a city that was once a hub for gold miners. He was the only brother to 4 sisters, Natasha, Michelle, Bianca, and Rihanna. Michael grew up in a close-knit family with caring and loving parents who worked hard to provide a decent life for their children. His father was an entrepreneur, and his mother created a nurturing atmosphere at home that encouraged the growth and development of their kids. Michael was a sociable and kind person who did well in school and sports. He even earned a black belt in karate, which gave him confidence and resilience. After completing his education, Michael trained as an electrician, a profession that offered good earnings and promising job prospects. He worked at mine number 4 of the Beatrix mine in the small town of Unison. In 2011, at the age of 23, Michael decided to register on a dating site to distract himself from a recent breakup and meet new people. That's when he came across the profile of a sweet and smiling girl who shared his interests. They both disliked loud parties and wanted to find true love and build a strong family. Michael was pleasantly surprised to have found a suitable match online. On April 2nd, he excitedly told his mother that he had a date and was busy preparing for it. He even withdrew 3,000 rand from his account to impress the girl. However, he was uneasy about the unusual meeting spot his friend had chosen, the city cemetery, and didn't mention it to his parents. At around 9 p.m. that evening, Michael said goodbye to his family and left the house, getting into his silver Peugeot 2007, a gift from his parents for his coming of age. When he arrived at the cemetery, the girl was running a bit late, but she looked stunning in a white dress and greeted him with a smile. They chatted comfortably, and she suggested they head to a more secluded area of the cemetery. There, they found a romantic setup, a blanket and a basket of fruit and wine. After having a glass of wine, the girl suddenly kissed Michael. But the pleasant feeling quickly turned to pain and horror as he realized he had fallen into a sinister trap. Chana Van Haren was born in 1991, a time of crisis for her parents. Her mother's pregnancy prompted the couple to put their divorce on hold and try to salvage their relationship. However, their efforts ultimately failed, and their home life continued to deteriorate. Chana's mother made no effort to hide her resentment towards her daughter, viewing her as an unwanted reminder of her husband. After the divorce, Chana's mother took the children and left their father behind. Chana suffered from a severe lack of love and attention from her mother, feeling lonely and misunderstood. Among her siblings, Chana struggled the most, growing increasingly withdrawn and sullen from a young age. She exhibited disturbing behaviors, such as talking about death and creating disturbing drawings. Her grandparents, alarmed by her behavior, suspected supernatural influence and took her to church, where she was subjected to an exorcism ritual. Chana's mental health declined as she got older. At 10, she had a disturbing incident where she threatened a house guest with a knife, prompting her family to seek professional psychiatric help. Fortunately, the medication improved her mood, and her father made an effort to spend quality time with her, even taking her on hunting trips. However, Chana later revealed that she found pleasure in harming animals, often bringing home dead creatures. When Chana turned 12, she formed a problematic friendship with an older man who introduced her to harmful substances and took advantage of her vulnerability. 2 years later, her mother moved to New Zealand, leaving Chana and her siblings in the care of their father and stepmother. At 15, Chana became involved with a 22-year-old man who had an unhealthy interest in Satanism, occultism, and voodoo cults. Fortunately, by her 17th birthday, Chana's life started to take a positive turn. She distanced herself from harmful relationships, successfully graduated from high school, and enrolled in college to study art and graphic design. After abandoning her interest in Satanism and ceasing to use harmful substances, Chana's emotional well-being significantly improved. She excelled in her studies and eventually secured a job in her chosen field. Chana's new job provided her with a supportive community, including her colleagues and management, where she discovered her talent for visual arts, earning her respect and recognition. She also started dating Warren, giving the impression to outsiders, including her family and close friends, that her life was back on track. However, beneath the surface, her inner struggles persisted. Her father was especially relieved, hoping she had finally grown up and would soon get married. But an unexpected obstacle emerged, threatening to disrupt her newfound stability. Warren's friend Roy, who claimed to be highly sensitive, sensed a dark and malevolent presence in Chana, despite her kind and friendly nature. His concerns were dismissed due to the contrast between his perceptions and her outward appearance. One day, Roy approached Chana, asking about Norman, a name that kept appearing in his mind, implying she might be unfaithful to Warren. Chana's response was shocking. She spat in his face and demanded he stop questioning her. Chana's friend, Norman, was later revealed to be the name of her imaginary childhood friend, Zazzle. This discovery changed the dynamics among their group of friends. At a party, Chana became interested in 24-year-old Martin. Martin came from a respected and wealthy family, unlike Chana. He had a good relationship with both his parents and was smart, well-mannered, and performed well in school. However, Martin had been struggling with a mental illness since he was 6 years old. He started having hallucinations, claiming that an entity appeared to him, making him believe he had incredible strength. As Martin grew older, his mental condition worsened, leading to problems at school and home. At 14, he was hospitalized in a psychiatric facility and diagnosed with schizophrenia. Although conventional treatment didn't work, his family and doctors eventually found the right medication to control his condition, except for occasional outbursts of aggression. Chana and Martin, two unstable young individuals, started a romantic relationship. Despite their outward appearance of happiness, their parents were oblivious to the issues the couple had faced in the past. As their relationship progressed, it ultimately led to devastating consequences. At first, the couple was social and outgoing, attending parties and interacting with others. Friends recalled noticing cuts on their hands, which they jokingly attributed to intimate experiments. However, as time passed, Chana and Martin began to withdraw from their social circle and developed an interest in dark practices, including Satanism, voodoo, and occult rituals. This fascination eventually extended to infamous serial killers. In 2011, Martins posted a photo with his girlfriend Chana on social media, captioned "Killers" with an ambiguous emoji. At the time, no one took the post seriously. However, unbeknownst to others, the couple had dark fantasies that eventually turned into a sinister plan. They wanted to torture and kill homeless people, and even practiced on animals. But their plan was put on hold, as they couldn't find a suitable victim. Chana created a profile on a dating site and caught the attention of Michael Van Eck. The couple targeted him for their twisted plan, and Chana suggested they meet in person. Michael agreed, despite the unusual meeting location. Chana and Martins carefully prepared for the date, planning every detail, including what to wear and how to end Michael's life. Chana approached the meeting fully prepared, and the trap was set. Michael fell for the bait, and Martins attacked him from behind with a knife. Despite being stabbed around 30 times, Michael resisted, which caught the attackers off guard. Chana intervened, and together, they overwhelmed Michael, who begged them to end his suffering. After the attack, Martin slit his own throat, and the couple began to dismember Michael's body. They severed his legs and decapitated him, placing the body parts in bags. They buried the body in a shallow grave, but couldn't make it deep enough due to lacking shovels. They then left the scene with the body parts using Michael's car, which they later abandoned in a troubled neighborhood. The next day, a cemetery worker discovered the grave and alerted the authorities. Meanwhile, Michael's parents were frantically searching for him, and his workplace reported him missing. The police found Michael's car, which led them to the cemetery, where they uncovered the gruesome crime scene. The local police were already investigating a mysterious body found on the cemetery grounds, with all signs pointing to foul play. They brought Michael Van Eck's family into the picture, as he had gone missing a day earlier. At the cemetery, Michael's mother identified her son's body by recognizing his personal belongings and distinctive childhood burn scars. The autopsy revealed that Michael had suffered multiple knife wounds and signs of struggle. The body had been dismembered after death, with a level of professional precision suggesting the perpetrators had experience with such acts. The evidence pointed to multiple attackers being involved, given the number and nature of the wounds, as well as the strength required to overpower the victim. DNA testing confirmed the body was 23-year-old Michael Van Eck's. During the investigation, police seized Michael's phone and computer, tracing his last communication to Chav Van Haan, who had invited him to the cemetery on the fateful night. When questioned, Chav and her boyfriend Martin confessed to their involvement in the murder. Chav's father was shocked by her calm and defiant confession, in which she claimed to have dreamed of committing such a crime since she started hunting with him. The lack of remorse from the couple shocked everyone, and they seemed to relish the public attention. They had planned to take their own lives if caught, but later changed their minds, wanting to live the life of monsters. The police search of the couple's apartment revealed a disturbing environment. The walls were covered in distorted portraits of Chav, depicting her without eyes, mouth, or ears in various guises. The police found disturbing evidence in the rooms, including ritual items, animal scalps, knives, and unknown objects. They also discovered the belongings of the murdered him, including his glasses and wallet. Martins later admitted that they took the victim's money to fund their next crime. The most shocking discovery, however, was made in the refrigerator. The police found the victim's head with his mouth sewn shut, which suggested that the couple planned to use it as a ritual bowl. Additionally, the victim's eyes and ears were found in separate containers. The police also found the victim's hand and leg buried near the murderer's home, along with the bodies of several animals. The girl's diary revealed her dark thoughts and plans. The evidence suggested that the couple derived pleasure from taking lives and mutilating bodies. Both Martins and Chana underwent mental evaluations, and the commission confirmed that they were aware of their actions and desired the consequences. In November 2011, Chana stood trial as a serial offender, despite it being a single incident. She openly admitted that she did not feel remorse and desired to repeat her actions. Psychiatrists diagnosed Chana with psychopathic and antisocial disorders, making her a more dangerous individual. Throughout the trial, she remained emotionless. Chana was found guilty and sentenced to 35 years in prison without parole, with 20 years for murder and an additional 15 years for robbery and dismemberment. Martins defended himself in court, claiming that he did not remember the events until he was in jail. He admitted to studying Satanism and occultism, which he believed pushed him and Chana to commit the crime. During the trial, he apologized to the victim's parents, although his apology sounded insincere. He implied that the victim was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, when in reality, the couple had lured him into a premeditated trap. Michael's mother was overcome with grief and struck Martins during one of the sessions. In the end, Martins was also found guilty and sentenced to 35 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after serving half of his sentence. After 2014, Chana and her lover Martins maintained a relationship through letters while he was in prison. In these letters, Martins referred to Chana as a dark goddess and wrote poetic phrases such as, "When you part your lips, words of a dead butterfly spill out, and they fall upon my mystical heart and paint it with sweet poison." However, over time, Chana ended the relationship, feeling that they had become emotionally disconnected from each other. While in prison, Chana exhibited exemplary behavior, teaching her fellow inmates art and theology. Some collectors, fascinated by notorious criminals, paid large sums for a photograph of Chana with her autograph, as well as a print of her hand. Martins also attracted a following, with a fan club that was monitored by the police for a long time to prevent his followers from emulating his violent actions. Despite his circumstances, Martins continued to receive therapy and completed his education through correspondence courses. Ultimately, the case highlights how two unstable individuals, driven by their desires and lacking boundaries, can destroy an innocent life. Furthermore, it reveals how some people, often hiding behind a seemingly normal facade, can harbor dark and sinister intentions. Unfortunately, new acquaintances can sometimes have a profoundly negative impact on our lives, marking a point of no return. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Mary Catherine Higdon. Mary Catherine Higdon was born in 1994. Mary was a lively and cheerful child who loved making people laugh with her humor, impressions, and playful antics. She had a special bond with her pet frog, which she'd often take on walks around town. Mary was an outdoorsy person who enjoyed exploring nature and appreciating its beauty. She was also passionate about performing, often putting on shows for her family that showcased her creativity and imagination. Her family saw great potential in her and thought she had a bright future ahead. As she grew older, Mary developed a strong interest in firearms. She learned to handle guns responsibly and appreciated their power. She became a skilled marksman and continued to develop her skills. During her high school years, Mary met her partner, Stephen Freeman, who would become the love of her life. Stephen was born on January 1st, 1995, in Griffin, Georgia, where he grew up with his parents and brother. He had a happy childhood, surrounded by a loving family and many friends who described him as laid-back, kind, and helpful. Stephen enjoyed spending time outdoors and exploring nature. Stephen was particularly close to his parents, but he shared a special bond with his mother. When she graduated from college after returning to school, Stephen wrote her a heartfelt letter expressing his admiration for her achievement. In the letter, he praised her hard work and determination, saying he looked up to her every day and loved her more than words could say. Stephen had immense respect and appreciation for his mother, which was clear in the way he spoke about her. After meeting in high school, Stephen and Mary Catherine formed a strong bond, united by their passion for outdoor activities like hiking, camping, fishing, and hunting. Their shared love of nature became the foundation of their robust relationship. After graduating from high school, the couple decided to take the next step by moving in together in Griffin, Georgia. Living together in their own space thrilled Mary Catherine and Stephen. What's more, Stephen's mother welcomed Mary Catherine into their family, treating her like a daughter. Every Sunday, the couple would visit Stephen's parents for a big family dinner, a tradition that brought them all closer together and solidified Mary Catherine's place within the family. Stephen's friends were initially hesitant about his relationship with Mary Catherine, but as they got to know her better, they began to appreciate her positive influence on Stephen's life. They saw how happy and joyful she made him, and they admired her enthusiasm for the outdoors. Stephen and Mary Catherine had different occupations. Stephen worked as a metal worker, specializing in roof repairs. Mary Catherine, on the other hand, had two part-time jobs. She worked as a teacher's assistant at St. George's Episcopal School, a preschool in Milner, Georgia. Additionally, she was employed at a sporting goods store where she sold guns. Interestingly, one of Stephen's close friends, Thomas Skinner, was also a colleague of Mary Catherine's at the sporting goods shop. Mary Catherine learned about basic gun safety while working at a sporting goods store, which taught her how to properly hold, load, and shoot a gun. Similarly, Stephen was enthusiastic about firearms and owned several shotguns and rifles that he used for hunting and target practice. He also kept a Glock 42 handgun at home for self-protection. After 5 years together, Mary Catherine and Stephen were still living in their apartment in Griffin, Georgia, by the summer of 2018. However, their relationship took a tragic turn on August 1st when Mary Catherine made a distressing 911 call, marking the end of their high school romance. Mary Catherine frantically called the dispatcher, screaming that she had accidentally just shot her boyfriend. The police quickly responded to the emergency call and arrived at the apartment shared by Mary Catherine and Stephen. They found Mary Catherine in a state of panic, crying and hyperventilating as she knelt beside Stephen's motionless body. She repeatedly wailed that she could not lose him, her voice filled with anguish and desperation. As the police carefully moved Mary Catherine away from Stephen, they were able to assess his condition. They discovered that he had been shot in the chest, but miraculously, he was still alive. The police immediately called for an ambulance to rush Stephen to the nearest hospital. At the emergency room, a team of skilled doctors worked to save Stephen's life. Despite their best efforts, his condition continued to worsen. Unfortunately, the severity of his injury ultimately proved fatal, and Stephen succumbed to his wounds. After Stephen was taken to the hospital, Mary Catherine accompanied the police to the station for a formal interview. Mary Catherine explained what happened on the night she accidentally shot Stephen. She said she was giving him the gun because he normally kept it beside his bed for safety. However, she clarified that they never loaded the chamber of their guns at home. During the police questioning, officers detected the smell of alcohol on Mary Catherine's breath. As they pressed her for more information, her story changed. Initially, she said she handed Stephen the gun, but later claimed she tossed it to him. The police were skeptical of her changing story, knowing that a gun wouldn't fire randomly just because it was tossed. Someone had to pull the trigger. The police investigation revealed that Mary Catherine must have been pointing the gun directly at Stephen's body for the bullet to have struck where it did, given the location of his gunshot wound. During her interview, Mary Catherine admitted, "I did it out of anger." But unfortunately, the recording equipment malfunctioned at that exact moment, and her words were inaudible. Despite the missing recording, the police still had strong evidence pointing to Mary Catherine's intention to harm Stephen. At the couple's apartment, they found signs of an intense argument, including scattered food throughout the house. Additionally, police records showed that officers had responded to 5 domestic disturbance calls at the couple's residence in the past year. The police also discovered that the gun used in the shooting was loaded on the night of the incident, contradicting Mary Catherine's claims. These findings collectively led the police to conclude that Mary Catherine had intentionally shot her boyfriend Stephen. The police found cooking grease residue on the gun and magazine, leading them to believe Mary Catherine, who was cooking dinner at the time, had loaded the weapon. After Mary Catherine shot Stephen, the police questioned his friends to learn more about their relationship. According to his friends, Mary Catherine and Stephen's relationship was marked by constant fighting and toxicity. They reported that the couple frequently had intense, heated arguments. Mary Catherine was described as possessive and verbally abusive towards Stephen, with signs of mental instability that heightened the tension between them. Whenever Stephen tried to create distance by leaving their apartment, Mary Catherine would barrage him with relentless texts and calls, forcing him to block her. One of Stephen's friends revealed that Stephen had confided in him about Mary Catherine's history of threatening him with a gun. Specifically, she had pulled a firearm on him at least 3 times in the past. Despite this, Stephen chose not to report these incidents to the authorities because he was worried about Mary Catherine getting into trouble. Stephen's friends stressed that his top priority was always Mary Catherine's well-being, even when it put his own safety at risk. When Stephen's friends learned that Mary Catherine had accidentally shot him, they were skeptical because they knew she was knowledgeable about handling firearms. In fact, just 3 months prior to the shooting, Stephen had texted a friend to say that Mary Catherine was running wild outside, screaming and attempting to shoot both him and herself. Stephen told a friend that Mary Catherine had previously pointed a gun at him, but the latest time, her eyes frightened him, making him think she might actually pull the trigger. By July 2018, Stephen was exhausted with Mary Catherine's behavior and considered leaving her. In July, Stephen planned to secretly move to another town while Mary Catherine was out, without telling her. He was afraid of how she might react if she knew he was leaving. Just 2 days before Mary Catherine fatally shot Stephen, the police found a series of revealing text messages from July 30th. The conversation started with Stephen sending Mary Catherine a friendly message. "Good morning, beautiful. Don't forget." Mary Catherine responded with, "Have a great day." Stephen replied, "You too. Love you." However, the night of July 31st, Stephen avoided Mary Catherine's texts and calls, as they were in the middle of a fight, and instead spent the evening at a friend's house. On the night of August 1st, Mary Catherine was at home preparing dinner when she realized Stephen wasn't there. She contacted Stephen's mother, who told her that he was with his friend. Angry and feeling betrayed, Mary Catherine drove to his friend's house, determined to confront Stephen. When she arrived, she saw Stephen sitting in the passenger seat of his friend's truck. Mary Catherine pulled up alongside and began yelling at Stephen, who tried to calm her down, promising to come home soon. Although Stephen's friends claimed that Mary Catherine had pointed a gun at Stephen on multiple occasions, Mary Catherine vigorously denied these allegations. She maintained that she never pulled a gun on Stephen. However, Mary Catherine did admit to having threatened to take her own life with a gun on several occasions. In a later interview, Stephen's mother shared her insight, believing that one of the main reasons Stephen stayed with Mary Catherine for so long was because she frequently threatened to harm herself. Stephen was afraid that Mary Catherine would follow through on her threats if he decided to leave her. However, on the night of the incident that led to Stephen's shooting, Mary Catherine claimed that Stephen was the one who became aggressive and violent. According to her, Stephen threw the dinner she had prepared in her face. Mary Catherine stated that she only picked up the gun to defend herself and scare Stephen away. She wanted him to leave the apartment, but Stephen allegedly lunged at her, which frightened her. As she backed away, the next thing she knew, Stephen was bleeding from the chest. At the time of the shooting, Mary Catherine didn't tell the police her version of events because she was embarrassed to admit that Stephen had a history of violence towards her. She claimed that Stephen had hit her in the past and was controlling. She even recalled an incident where Stephen kicked her out of bed with such force that she hit her head on the door frame. However, Stephen's friends had a different perspective on their relationship. They claimed to have witnessed Mary Catherine being physically aggressive towards Stephen, stating that she had slapped him hard in the face. Mary Catherine's sister contradicted her account of their relationship, revealing that she had seen bruises on Mary Catherine's arm 2 weeks before Stephen was killed. When questioned, Mary Catherine confided in her sister that Stephen had grabbed her, causing the injuries. After investigating Stephen's death as a murder, the authorities charged Mary Catherine with murder, aggravated assault, and firearm possession during a felony. The prosecution offered her a plea deal, proposing a life sentence with possible parole if she pleaded guilty. However, Mary Catherine declined the offer, opting to stand trial and assert her innocence. At the trial, Mary Catherine maintained that she shot Stephen in self-defense, denying the charges against her. The trial, which began on June 17, 2019, nearly a year after Stephen's death, exposed the tumultuous relationship between Mary Catherine and Stephen. Mary Catherine's lawyers argued that she acted out of genuine fear, citing Stephen's history of violence and abuse. Mary Catherine testified that she was the victim of Stephen's controlling, manipulative, and dangerous behavior, which included physical, mental, emotional, verbal, and sexual abuse. She described being hit, humiliated, and degraded by Stephen on multiple occasions, and shared specific incidents where he smacked her around and verbally abused her. Mary Catherine explained that Stephen's constant threats and abuse left her feeling trapped, fearful for her life, and constantly walking on eggshells to avoid triggering his anger. She presented evidence in the form of text messages, including one where Stephen threatened to punish her, which she said meant he would physically harm her. Another text message showed Stephen's explicit threat to hit her back twice as hard if she defended herself. Mary Catherine's defense team also presented messages that supported her allegations of sexual assault, including a text where Stephen mentioned his red room, which she described as a place where they engaged in violent and aggressive intercourse. Mary Catherine testified that Stephen sexually assaulted her on 2 occasions, including one after they returned from a vacation to Walt Disney World, where he allegedly ignored her pleas to stop and intensified his efforts instead. The defense presented over 60 pages of text messages from Stephen, which showcased his pattern of verbal assaults and threatening behavior towards Mary Catherine. These messages included disturbing images and captions, such as one showing Stephen holding a dead fish, accompanied by the caption, "This is you." Another message showed Stephen's violent threats towards Mary Catherine after she cheated on him, where he wrote, "I'm going to wreck you for wrecking me." The defense also alleged that Stephen's drug and alcohol addiction contributed to his violent outbursts. Mary Catherine maintained that she was the one who ended the relationship, not Stephen, and that her actions on the night she shot him were a result of her desperation to escape the abuse. Mary Catherine claimed that Stephen had reacted violently to some news and had threatened to attack her, causing her to defend herself by grabbing a gun. She said the last thing she had told him before shooting was to get out of her house. However, Stephen's friends and family disputed Mary Catherine's allegations, describing Stephen as a friendly and caring person. Stephen's mother said she was unaware of any threatening messages her son had sent Mary Catherine and did not condone such behavior. Although she acknowledged that Stephen may have said some angry things, she believed he did not mean them. In court, the prosecution questioned Mary Catherine about her story, pointing out that she had never reported any alleged abuse by Stephen. They also presented evidence that Mary Catherine had searched for violent and explicit content online just hours before the shooting, which she claimed was to find ways to make Stephen happy. The prosecution argued that Mary Catherine had changed her story about the shooting multiple times, and that a text from Stephen suggested she had pointed a gun at him before. Additionally, Stephen's friends testified that they had witnessed Mary Catherine's violent behavior towards him. After 4 hours of deliberation, the jury found Mary Catherine not guilty of murder, assault, and other charges. The verdict surprised Stephen's loved ones, who felt that justice had not been served. Later, the jurors revealed that they believed Mary Catherine had intentionally killed Stephen, but there was not enough evidence to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. This lack of evidence made it difficult to determine whether the shooting was murder or self-defense. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Antonia Barra. Antonia Barra was born on December 3, 1999, in Temuco, Chile, to a wealthy family. She was the youngest of 5 children, with 2 older brothers, Sebastian and Ignacio, and 2 sisters, Catalina and Carla. Antonia was particularly close to Catalina, whom she considered her best friend and confidant. Her parents valued education and encouraged their children to pursue their interests, including sports and music. As the youngest child, Antonia was especially loved and spoiled by her parents. Despite this, she was a diligent student and dreamed of studying tourism and traveling the world. At the age of 15, Antonia met Martín Pradines on social media in 2015. Martin was 8 years older than Antonia and lived in the same city. He was divorced and had a child from a previous marriage. Little is known about Martin's early life, except that he was born in February 1992 in Tomoko to Ivan Pronis and Paula Dare. When Martin was 20, he got a girl from his school pregnant, and to avoid scandal and punishment, he married her. However, the marriage ended shortly after the birth of their child. Martin and Antonia were acquaintances who knew each other from socializing with young people on social networks between 2015 and 2017. However, their relationship remained purely platonic. After Antonia graduated from high school and enrolled in university, she relocated to a different city, and they lost touch. At university, Antonia focused on her studies in the travel industry, formed new friendships, and explored new hobbies. Martin was no longer on her mind. During her breaks from university, Antonia would return to her hometown but primarily stayed in touch with her family, including her parents and siblings. During her time at university, Antonia developed a close bond with a fellow student named Consuela Herb, and they became nearly inseparable. She also started a romantic relationship with a student named Rodrigo Aguad, which lasted for approximately a year. However, they got into a dispute at the beginning of the new semester in September 2019 and decided to take a break from each other. Antonio had recently gone through a breakup and was feeling down. Luckily, the Chilean national holiday was just around the corner, offering a long weekend and a chance to take her mind off things. She and her best friend decided to attend an electronic music festival in the charming town of Pucón. They carpooled with 3 classmates, using Consuela's car. As it happened, close friends of Antonio's family owned a summer house in Pucón, and since the owners were out of town, they kindly offered Antonio and her friend the use of their house, even providing them with the spare key. Upon arrival, the group split up, and they friends settled into the spacious and cozy house, looking forward to a relaxing weekend getaway. On the evening of September 18th, Antonia ran into Martin while walking around the city, and they struck up a conversation. As it turned out, Martin was also in town for the festival with his friends and was staying in a large rented house just outside the city center. They hit it off and made plans to meet up the next day at a party at a popular nightclub. Antonia called her parents to fill them in on her plans, and her father warned her to be careful and not to drink too much. Antonia laughed it off and promised to be responsible. The next day, Antonia and her friends spent hours getting ready for the party, choosing outfits and doing their makeup. Before heading out, they shared a bottle of wine and then took a taxi to the club. When they arrived, they ordered a bottle of champagne at the bar and drank it together before hitting the dance floor. It was after midnight when Martin and his friends arrived at the club. Antonia was already quite drunk by then, but she continued to drink and dance with Martin. According to her friend, Consuela, Antonia was advised to slow down, but she didn't listen. At one point, Consuela lost track of Antonia and spent half an hour searching for her. When she finally found her, Antonia was in another room with Martin, barely able to stand due to her intoxication. Consuela saw her classmate Benjamin Morales at the club and asked for his help in getting her friend Antonia home. However, Antonia refused to leave, saying the night was still young. A short while later, she started to feel unwell, and her friends took her outside for some fresh air. After she felt a bit better, she returned to the club. Consuela went to Antonia later that night and told her that she was exhausted and ready to head home. However, Antonia declined, wanting to stay and continue having fun. Consuela then left the club, giving up on convincing Antonia to leave with her. She took a taxi home and went straight to bed. Benjamin saw Martin escorting Antonia out of the club, holding her because she was swaying from side to side. According to Benjamin, Antonia was too drunk to fight back, and Martin took advantage of her state. They waited near the entrance for a while, allowing Antonia to recover a bit. Soon, Martine's friends arrived and suggested they continue partying at their rented house. The company ordered a taxi, but Martine and Antonia decided to walk, as she was unwell and disoriented. Surveillance cameras captured their walk, showing the man supporting a drunk student who was trying to break free from his grasp. Along the way, they stopped at a 24-hour supermarket, where Martine purchased beer. Inside the empty store, Martine attempted to kiss she, but she pushed him away and turned her back on him. It was clear she was uncomfortable, but her intoxication left her unable to resist or escape. Martine, being stronger, continued to lead Antonia, and they eventually arrived at the rented house around 8 a.m. The people in the living room saw that she was upset, but she was too drunk to clearly communicate her distress. Despite Antonia's obvious unease, Martine continued to hug and try to kiss her. The other friends, also heavily intoxicated, failed to intervene. Eventually, they retreated to a bedroom, where the man assaulted she while she was in a dazed state. Antonia was confused and disoriented as Martine ignored her attempts to resist and stop him. After the incident, he rejoined his friends in the living room and continued the party, leaving Antonia alone in the bedroom. Later, around 9 a.m., she managed to call Benjamin, but her speech was slurred and she was crying uncontrollably, making it hard for him to understand her. She was unable to explain what had happened or where she was. Benjamin became concerned and called Consuela, telling her that Antonia was in trouble and needed help. Antonia then called Consuela herself, struggling to communicate, and eventually found out her location, prompting Consuela to go to her aid. When Consuela met Martine at the doorstep, she asked him what had happened, but he just smiled and claimed that everything was consensual. However, when Consuela found her friend, Antonia, in one of the rooms, she was shocked by her condition. Antonia was crying and begged to be taken away from the place as soon as possible. They left shortly after and went home, where Antonia immediately took a shower. Despite her friend's advice to preserve the evidence and report the incident to the police, Antonia insisted that no one should ever find out what had happened. She tried to act normally when she spoke to her parents later that day, hiding her true emotions. The next morning, Antonia and her friends returned to the student dormitory. In the aftermath, Antonia struggled to cope with the trauma. She tried to forget the nightmare and resume her normal life, attending classes and socializing with friends. However, only Consuela noticed that Antonia was not okay. As time passed, Antonia's mental state deteriorated, and she gradually fell into a deep depression. Antonia was traumatized and didn't want to talk to anyone about what had happened to her. She refused to file a police report, fearing that it would only spread the news and make things worse. However, rumors about her began to circulate quickly. They would whisper, point, and laugh at her. One of her classmates even had the audacity to ask her about the rumors in front of everyone. However, what sent Antonia over the edge was a phone call from Rodrigo, her ex-boyfriend, with whom she still had strong feelings and had been holding on to the hope of rekindling their relationship. During the call, Rodrigo repeated all the rumors he had heard and told Antonia that he never wanted to see her again. Antonia broke down in tears, trying to defend herself and explain that the rumors were not true. But Rodrigo was unforgiving, using derogatory language to describe her and calling her promiscuous before hanging up. This conversation was devastating for Antonia, and she couldn't cope with the emotional pain. On Saturday, October 12, 2019, Antonia went to her parents' house, seeking comfort and solace with her family. Concern for Antonia's well-being grew as her relatives noticed a deep sadness in her eyes, despite her claims that everything was okay. Later that evening, she posted old childhood photos on social media, accompanied by a distressing message. The following day, after dinner with her family, Antonia retreated to her room on the third floor. Her sister Catalina checked on her about an hour later, but Antonia asked to be left alone, saying she wanted to sleep. Catalina granted her wish, turned off the light, and bid her a loving goodbye before leaving the room. 2 hours passed before their mother, Marcella, came to Antonia's room to announce that dinner was ready. After knocking on the door with no response, Marcella entered the room and initially thought Antonia was asleep. However, upon touching her hand, she was met with an unsettling stillness. Devastated, Marcella screamed for help, and the rest of the household rushed to the room. In a state of panic, they called for emergency services while attempting to revive Antonia on their own before medical professionals arrived. Antonia's situation had become hopeless, and she tragically took her own life by overdosing on sleeping pills. The investigation into her death and the first attempts to hold the perpetrator accountable began. The news shocked her family and friends, as many were unaware of the severe emotional distress Antonia had been experiencing. As Antonia's parents sought to understand what had happened to their daughter, they spoke with her friends and classmates. They were shocked by the rumors and gossip that had been circulating about Antonia. Consuela, in particular, shared everything she knew, but the parents felt that more needed to be done. They hired a top private detective to help reconstruct the events leading up to Antonia's death and gather evidence to bring the person responsible to justice. Alejandro, determined to seek justice for his daughter, used his connections to organize a press conference. In front of dozens of cameras, he shared the devastating truth: his daughter had been the victim of forced bullying, which she had been unable to survive. The person responsible, he emphasized, remained at large. The detective reconstructed the timeline of events from that fateful night and gathered statements from several key witnesses, including Consuela, Benjamin, and a few other university students, who were willing to testify in court. With all the evidence collected, the Antonia family petitioned the court to arrest and prosecute Martín for his actions. However, the police determined that the evidence presented was insufficient to warrant taking him into custody. Martín claimed that everything that happened was consensual, although he admitted that both parties were intoxicated. Furthermore, the victim did not report the incident to the police. As a result, Martín remained free, and he and his family subsequently filed a lawsuit against the Antonia family, accusing them of defamation, harassment, and the unauthorized disclosure of their personal information. According to the Martín family, Antonia's relatives had slandered their son and brother, Martín. In response, the Martín family decided to hold a press conference to defend themselves publicly. They argued that Martín's reputation had been harmed without justification and presented themselves as the ones who had been wronged. The Martín family also accused Antonia of sharing their personal contact information, including their home address, phone numbers, and social media handles. As a result, Martín and his family received daily insults and anonymous death threats. The Martín family maintained that Martín's guilt had not been proven and that everything had happened by mutual consent. They expressed their willingness to defend Martín's case in court. Surprisingly, after this statement, the police supported the Martín family, causing Antonia's relatives to stop making negative comments about them and to stop sharing personal data. This sudden change was a major blow. This unexpected turn of events was a significant setback. Despite this, Antonia's relatives continued to seek justice with the support of the public. Victims who were initially silent about their experiences began speaking out after Antonia's case gained widespread public attention. Within a month, 8 more girls came forward to the police, claiming they too had been harassed and assaulted by Martín. They had previously remained silent, fearing they would be condemned and censured. One of the victims was just 13 years old at the time of the assault. As more girls who suffered at the hands of Martín began contacting the police, he was eventually taken into custody. Martín was arrested in June 2020 and held at Temuco City Prison on suspicion of committing assaults between 2011 and 2019. However, Martín was released on his own recognizance less than a month after his lawyer intervened, and was allowed to remain free for the duration of the investigation. Furthermore, several lawsuits filed by the injured girls were rejected due to the statute of limitations having expired. There was a high likelihood that many cases would be disregarded. Out of 8 appeals, only 2 were registered by the court. The release of Martine from custody and the rejection of the victim's claims sparked widespread outrage. Protests and rallies erupted nationwide, with thousands demanding justice. In response, the prosecutor's office re-examined the case and pushed for a change in Martine's bail conditions, seeking to return him to custody. Meanwhile, the statute of limitations was lifted for all cases of violence committed by Martine. During his trial in February 2021, his social media messages were revealed, in which he boasted about his actions to friends. It was also discovered that Martine kept a collection of his victims' underwear at home, taken as trophies. This collection included items from victims who had previously reported him to the court, as well as a belonging of Antonia's. On August 26, 2021, Martine was charged with 9 counts of crimes involving sexual misconduct. 3 of the victims were minors when the incidents occurred. The Antonia family appealed to the public to speak out against violence and bring those responsible to justice. The trial began in June 2022, allowing Martine's lawyers sufficient time to prepare. They presented witness statements and surveillance footage showing that Antonia left with the defendant voluntarily and did not attempt to resist him. The defense challenged the testimonies of other victims, but in August 2022, the court delivered a guilty verdict against Martine. He was convicted of 8 crimes involving sexual misconduct and causing Antonia's nervous breakdown, which ultimately led to her death. Martine was sentenced to 20 years in prison. However, his lawyers, led by Pinus, promptly filed an appeal. On December 29, the Supreme Court ordered a new trial. In March 2023, Martine's case was assigned to the Public Defender's Office. During the new trial, Martine maintained his innocence, attributing the events leading to Antonia's death to the large quantity of alcohol they had consumed together. Despite this, on July 7, 2023, Martine was found guilty again. The court reduced his initial 20-year sentence to 17 years, considering the 3 years he had already spent in prison. He had only 14 years left to serve. However, Antonia's family expressed dissatisfaction with this decision in an official press release made by her father. They noted that no punishment could bring back their daughter. During the ongoing lawsuits, Antonia's family and other victims affected by Martine's actions joined forces with public figures to advocate for women's rights. Together, they worked to amend the criminal code, specifically the sections related to sexual offenses. Their objective was to protect the rights of victims of harassment and sexual violence. In the early hours of August 2, 2015, precisely at 3 a.m., an urgent call was made to 911. Tom Martins, an older gentleman, reported in a frantic tone that his son-in-law, Jason Corbett, had assaulted his daughter, Molly. To protect her, Tom intervened and struck Jason on the head with a baseball bat. He mentioned Jason was bleeding heavily and might already be deceased. He urgently requested an ambulance to their location. Jason Corbett, a 39-year-old businessman from Limerick, Ireland, was known for his cheerful and kind personality. He had a twin brother named Wayne and a sister named Tracy. In 2003, at the age of 27, Jason married Margaret Fitzpatrick. They soon welcomed a son named Jack and a daughter named Sarah. Their family life appeared idyllic in Ireland until tragedy struck. In 2006, not long after Sarah's birth, Margaret experienced a severe asthma attack in the middle of the night. She woke Jason up, struggling to breathe. Despite Jason's efforts to help with medication and an inhaler, her condition deteriorated. In desperation, he called for an ambulance. However, Margaret sadly passed away en route to the hospital. At just 30 years old and serving as the director of a small packaging company in Ireland, Jason was left to raise their children, his 2-year-old son and 3-month-old daughter, alone. His friends noted his profound sadness and struggle following this loss. A year after Margaret's passing, Jason sought help with childcare and housekeeping duties. This led him to hire Molly Martins, a 25-year-old American woman. Molly arrived in Ireland from the United States in March 2008. A longtime friend of Jason's met her at the airport, but immediately harbored reservations about her suitability for the role of nanny and housekeeper. Molly appeared much younger than her age suggested, and had a rather flamboyant style, sporting a bright coat with a fur collar, along with cowboy boots and heavy makeup. To this friend, she seemed more like someone out of theater than fitting for such significant responsibilities. Molly Martins grew up in Knoxville, Tennessee. She left Clemson University and decided to start afresh in Ireland. Molly quickly formed a strong bond with Jason's son and daughter, showing tenderness and care. Soon, Jason's close friends noticed a change. He was gradually healing after the loss of his first wife, appearing more lively and engaged. Feelings blossomed between Jason and Molly, leading to a romantic relationship. The couple, along with Jack and Sarah, enjoyed a vacation together. They had a wonderful time, growing closer while planning their future life. 2 years later, on Valentine's Day 2010, Jason invited Molly to a cafe where he proposed with a ring. Overjoyed, Molly began planning their wedding in America. She persuaded Jason to move to her home country, and he agreed. In 2011, Jason sold his house and relocated his job to the United States. The family settled in Davidson County, North Carolina, where Jason and Molly married in a ceremony attended by many relatives and friends from both America and Ireland. After their marriage, Molly worked as a swimming instructor, but mainly focused on caring for Jack and Sarah. Meanwhile, Jason held a managerial position in the United States. Initially happy, their marital relationship eventually began to deteriorate. This growing tension peaked on August 1, 2015, when Molly's parents, Tom and Sharon Martins, visited the Corbett family's home at around 11 p.m. Jason welcomed them in the driveway and helped with their luggage. Tom brought a baseball bat as a gift for Jack, Jason's son, who was out at a party with friends at the time. That evening, Jason, Molly, her parents, and Sarah had dinner together. They opted for pizza. Jack returned home close to midnight. However, Tom decided not to give him the baseball bat at such an hour, but intended to present it later instead. The following morning, after 11 p.m., the family retired for the night. Molly and Jason slept in the master bedroom on the first floor, with the children, Jack and Sarah, in adjacent rooms. Molly's parents were accommodated in the guest room on the second floor. In the early of August 2nd, around 3 a.m., Tom Martins called 911. He claimed that his son-in-law, Jason, had attacked Molly and that he had struck Jason with a baseball bat in response. Tom urgently requested assistance, unsure of Jason's condition, who lay unconscious and bleeding. The 911 dispatcher guided Tom and Molly through cardiopulmonary resuscitation procedures in an effort to revive Jason before medical help arrived. When police and ambulance services arrived 10 minutes later, they found Molly outside near a car, appearing distraught and in shock, but without actual tears. Inside, they discovered the lifeless body of 39-year-old Jason Corbett in the main bedroom. Blood spattered across the bed, walls and floor. Both Tom's and Molly's clothing bore bloodstains while blood marked Jason's body. Near Jason lay a baseball bat and a large cobblestone, both with traces of blood, as well as an overturned lamp. Throughout this ordeal, Jack and Sarah remained asleep in their rooms. Tom and Molly did not deny their involvement in Jason's death, asserting it was self-defense. They were taken to the station for questioning. At the police station, 66-year-old Tom Martins, an FBI veteran with 30 years of experience, stated that his son-in-law was insane and constantly tormented his daughter. According to Tom, Jason was drunk that evening. Everyone went to bed, but Tom woke up at night because he heard screams and loud voices on the first floor of the house. He jumped out of bed, grabbed a baseball bat, and ran downstairs. Tom entered the main bedroom and saw Jason holding Molly by the throat with both hands. He yelled at Jason to let her go, to which Jason turned to him and said he would kill her. Tom claimed his protective instincts kicked in instantly, so he hit Jason with the baseball bat, but noted that their forces were unequal. Jason didn't appear to feel the blow as he tried to drag Molly into the bathroom and shut the door. However, Tom intervened. Jason pushed the elderly man, making him fall and causing his glasses to fly off. Tom confessed that at that moment, he believed he was going to be. Jason spotted the bat on the floor and reached for it. At that point, Molly grabbed a stone and shouted, "Don't touch my dad." Then, she struck her husband on the head with all her might. Following that, Tom seized the baseball bat and began hitting Jason until he fell to the floor. During questioning, 32-year-old Molly Corbett recounted the same story to investigators. She explained that her daughter Sarah woke up during the night screaming from night terrors. This woke Jason, who became very angry and lashed out at his wife. He started strangling her, threatening to kill her. Her father came to Molly's aid. Molly admitted hitting her husband on the head with a heavy stone to save her father. When asked where she got the stone, Molly replied that it had been on her bedside table. They had planned to paint cobblestones with their children for decorating flower beds with colorful stones. The woman couldn't recall how many times she hit her husband. She only mentioned it was a desperate fight for survival. Midway through the interrogation, Molly expressed enduring pain from being choked by her husband. Investigators photographed her neck, which bore a red mark in its center. Later, police compared these photos with those taken during her arrest and found no red marks on Molly's neck at detention time. She confessed that while there had been a fight between herself and her husband the day before the tragedy, it was then when Jason grabbed her by the arms and neck. Throughout questioning, she frequently complained of throat pain. Both Tom and Molly claimed in unison that Jason Corbett had been treating his wife brutally. However, his family provided conflicting accounts. Tracy Lynch, Jason Corbett's sister, shared insights about what she described as an unusual relationship between them. Dynamics observed during Jason's wedding to Molly indicated Molly exerted considerable control over Jason, often becoming upset if things didn't align with her expectations. Her reluctance to interact with Jason's visiting relatives raised further concerns. Additional alarm was added by the revelation of one of Molly's friends. This friend stated that Molly told everyone she had been friends with Jason's first wife, Margaret, until Margaret died of cancer. This contradicted family reports, as everyone knew she had died of an asthma attack. Despite these red flags and attempts by Jason's family and friends to dissuade him from marrying Molly due to her odd behavior, the wedding proceeded. This event marked the beginning of a complicated and troubled union. Initially, Molly and Jason Corbett's marriage appeared harmonious. Molly formed a close bond with Jason's children, Jack and Sarah, treating them as her own. However, as their first wedding anniversary approached in 2012, Jason expressed a desire to return to Ireland, his homeland, citing unhappiness in a foreign country. This disclosure marked the beginning of a decline in the couple's relationship. Despite Jack and Sarah referring to Molly as their mother, Jason resisted Molly's intentions to legally adopt them. He wanted to preserve the memory of their biological mother. During this period, Molly's behavior started to change noticeably. Jason grew increasingly concerned about her mental well-being, suspecting she might have a psychological disorder. He observed a stark contrast between her initially sweet demeanor and subsequent behavior, which he perceived as more manipulative and controlling. Molly began isolating Jason from his family, often curtailing his phone conversations with them to mere seconds. Following the untimely death of his first wife, Jason Corbett designated his sister, Tracy Lynch, as the legal guardian for his children, Jack and Sarah. In the event of his own demise, Tracy was well aware that if something to Jason, Molly would strongly contest the custody of the children. When Jason passed away, Tracy promptly traveled to North Carolina to file for custody, anticipating a legal battle with Molly, who also sought custody rights. During their strained marriage, Molly had sought legal counsel to understand her rights over Jason's children in the event of a divorce. Her lawyer advised her to document their disputes and accumulate incriminating evidence against Jason. Consequently, Molly began secretly recording their conversations. In these recordings, Molly appeared disengaged, often ignoring Jason's repeated questions while he escalated his voice. A close friend of Molly's disclosed that although Molly rarely discussed her marital issues, she began to express negative sentiments about Jason following his death. Molly confided in her friend that Jason was domineering and abusive. She accused him of forcing her into intimate acts, verbally abusing her, and progressively worsening in his treatment towards her. Despite these allegations, Molly did not report these incidents to the authorities. 4 days after Jason Corbett's tragic demise, his children Jack and Sarah, aged 10 and 8, were interviewed by a child welfare professional. In this interview, they shared observations about the relationship between their parents. Notably, they mentioned their mother Molly being cautious about not waking their father Jason, fearing it might anger him. Jack specifically talked about a cobblestone kept on the bedside table. He clarified that they had brought the stone inside due to rain, intending to decorate it later. Regarding their parents' interactions, both Jack and Sarah described incidents where they witnessed physical altercations initiated by their father against Molly. They recounted occasions where Jason physically assaulted Molly, including hitting and pushing her, and frequently snapping at her over minor issues. Subsequent to these revelations, Jack and Sarah were temporarily placed under the care of their biological relatives. Aunt Tracy Lynch, who had traveled from Ireland, stayed in a North Carolina hotel during the unfolding custody battle. By the time Jason Corbett's autopsy was completed, it revealed the grim details of his demise. The cause of death was a traumatic brain injury. Jason had suffered approximately 12 strikes to the head with both a baseball bat and a brick. These blows were concentrated on the same area, leading to his scalp being severely torn from his skull and his skull itself being fractured. Notably, the medical examiner concluded that at least one of these strikes was inflicted after Jason had already passed away. The toxicology report provided additional insights. It indicated that Jason's blood contained slightly higher than normal levels of alcohol. Additionally, traces of trazodone, an antidepressant medication commonly prescribed for insomnia, were also found in his system. Jason Corbett was laid to rest in his hometown Limerick, Ireland, alongside his first wife, Margaret. Their shared tombstone is adorned with a wedding photograph, serving as a poignant reminder of their lives and the bond they shared. 16 days after Jason Corbett's passing, his sister Tracy Lynch took his children Jack and Sarah to Ireland, separating them from their stepmother Molly. Molly was left in a state of shock and despair upon discovering that Jack and Sarah had been taken to another country. She attempted to reach out to them through phone calls and social media posts, hoping these messages would somehow reach the children. Meanwhile, Molly and Tom consistently maintained that their actions against Jason were in self-defense. However, the investigation into Jason's death was ongoing. Tracy Lynch believed in a different motive. She speculated that Molly was aware of Jason's plans to leave her and take their children with him. Tracy surmised that on the night of the incident, Jason had informed Molly of his decision. Out of fear and loneliness, Molly reacted violently. In Ireland, Jack and Sarah received psychological support and gradually adapted to their new environment 9 months after their father's tragic demise. They admitted they had been coerced into lying about the alleged domestic violence at home. They revealed that Molly had manipulated them into fabricating stories about their father's behavior, threatening them with the loss of contact with her if they refused to comply. Contrary to their earlier statements, the children clarified that their father had never been abusive toward Molly. During the course of the inquiry, investigators discovered Molly Corbett's past connection with her ex-partner, Keith Magan. He provided several insightful details regarding her earlier life. Keith and Molly initially connected through a dating website, quickly falling for each other at their first meeting. They moved in together just 6 weeks later. Keith acknowledged Molly's independent spirit, jovial nature, and unique personality. However, she eventually disclosed her struggle with bipolar disorder to him. Keith wasn't overly worried about this revelation since Molly was on medication and generally stable, except for occasional shifts in behavior when she missed her doses. She wasn't violent or prone to outbursts, but would insist on not letting Keith leave during disputes. Molly often spent extended periods in the bathtub, then sat on the cold floor weeping. Despite these challenges, they continued their lives together without plans for children. Molly informed Keith she was on contraceptives, but unexpectedly declared they were expecting a child. At this point, Keith, the family's sole earner, faced financial strain and felt unprepared for parenthood. His discovery of an unopened pack of contraceptives in Molly's wardrobe led him to realize her deceit. Yet Keith, being an honorable man, proposed to Molly, who accepted joyfully. Undeterred by her health issues, she maintained her regimen of antidepressants and other medications, sometimes taking up to 16 pills daily, which caused Keith concern for their unborn child's well-being. Molly once dreamt of losing the baby, and tragically, the following day, the hospital confirmed the fetus's demise. This incident further strained their relationship. Molly plunged into profound mourning and was diagnosed with severe depression, as documented in her medical records. Her parents began supporting her more fervently and, simultaneously, developed a disdainful view of Keith, casting him as the antagonist. In early 2008, Molly informed her fiancé of her plan to go to Europe to find work as a nanny or house assistant. By March, she packed her belongings and left the apartment she had been renting with her fiancé. 10 days later, Molly called Keith to tell him she was in Ireland, had found a job, and everything was fine. From that point on, they never spoke or saw each other again. Keith Magan first heard from a North Carolina detective in October 2015 via email. Through this communication, he discovered the unfortunate events that had unfolded. It was revealed that Molly had kept her significant relationship engagement and subsequent departure to another country a secret from everyone. Keith admitted that upon viewing an interview featuring Tom and Molly, in which they portrayed the late Justin Corbett as malevolent and dreadful, he found their story unconvincing and, moreover, perceived their expressions as merely facades. In January 2016, half a year following Jason's demise, Tom and Molly were unexpectedly indicted for second-degree murder. By July 2017, 2 years since the incident, the father and daughter duo faced their trial together. They maintained their stance of having acted in self-defense in Jason's killing. During the trial, Tom Martin claimed his actions were what any true father would do: protect his daughter. He believed it was a life-or-death situation and did all he could to safeguard both Molly and himself. Tom confessed he was the one who struck Jason with a bat, ceasing only when he felt sure Jason no longer posed a threat. The prosecution contended in court that the severity of the blows indicated deep-seated animosity, not mere self-defense. An expert analyzing the bloodstains deduced that some strikes were dealt when Jason's head was 30 to 50 centimeters off the ground, strongly suggesting Tom continued to strike him even when he was down and no threat. Bloodstains on Molly's pajama bottom suggested she was close to Jason during these blows. A long, light-colored hair, possibly Molly's, was found in John's hand, but it wasn't tested. The autopsy revealed defensive wounds on John's left hand, but none on his right. This is significant because he might have used his right hand to grab Molly by the throat. During the trial, Lieutenant Frank Young, assigned to document injuries on Tom and Molly the night of the incident, took the stand. He recalled noticing self-inflicted marks on Molly's neck. Lieutenant Young repeatedly told her to stop and noted that except for dried blood on her cheek, forehead, and hair, she had no other injuries. Similarly, Tom had no injuries on the front of his shirt, but blood was found on his watch dial and under his fingernails. His glasses remained intact. Paramedic Amanda Hackworth also testified. When she arrived at the scene and examined Jason's body, she found his torso already cold with patches of dried blood. This contradicted Molly's claim that they had immediately called 911 after Jason lost consciousness and collapsed. The trial further revealed that Jason Corbett had a life insurance policy, naming Molly as the beneficiary. It was also disclosed that Jason often sent money to Molly's parents during his lifetime. For instance, in 2011, he sent $50,000 to Tom, supposedly for wedding expenses. A neighbor came forward during the trial, recounting how he and Jason spent an evening together drinking beer from about 3:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. The neighbor described Jason as very relaxed and noted Jason's calm interactions with his in-laws when they arrived at the Corbett residence. He witnessed Tom and his wife arriving with Jason, welcoming them and helping carry heavy bags from their car into the house. Finally, a nurse testified about her observations of the couple before this incident occurred. The tragic event unfolded when it was reported that trazodone had been prescribed to Molly a few days before the incident on July 30, 2015. Jason had visited the hospital 2 weeks prior to his passing, expressing concerns about frequent dizziness, tension, and unprovoked anger. After 9 days filled with witness accounts, debates, and distressing crime scene photographs, the jury reached a verdict in merely 3 hours. Molly Corbett and her father, Tom Martins, were convicted of second-degree murder and received sentences of 20 and 25 years in prison, respectively. Upon hearing the verdict, Molly turned to her mother with regret in her voice, stating, "I'm so sorry, but I shouldn't have let him kill me." While it seemed justice had been served for the convicted individuals, the case was far from over. Just an hour after the jury delivered their verdict, a juror disclosed outside the courthouse that discussions about Jason Corbett's case occurred prior to the formal deliberation period. This was a significant breach of legal protocol. In light of this revelation, the defense swiftly submitted a request to overturn the conviction due to juror misconduct. However, this motion was dismissed by the trial court judge. A year later, the defense approached the appellate court, highlighting several investigative errors. One issue raised concerned blood stains on Tom Martin's shorts. The prosecution had suggested these stains belonged to Jason's blood, implying Tom stood over Jason during the assault, but they were never actually tested. The prosecutor argued it was impractical and unnecessary to test every single blood spot. The defense also underscored initial statements made by Jack and Sarah. They initially claimed their father was abusive towards them. Molly and expressed fear of him. The defense argued that the siblings' late attractions, where they to lying, were influenced by professionals, assuring them to change their testimony. On 4th, 2020, the North Carolina Court of Appeals determined Tom Martins and Molly Corbett should be granted a new trial. This decision was later upheld by the Supreme Court of North Carolina. Subsequently, both were released on a $200,000 bond. While awaiting the retrial, they were required to hand over their passports and were forbidden from making any contact with Jack and Sarah. Currently, Jason Corbett's case has been moved to Forsyth County, North Carolina, for additional legal proceedings, marking a minor triumph for Tom and Molly. Jason's children, Jack and Sarah, are now residing with their biological aunt in Ireland. Sarah, aged 16, has authored a series of books aimed at helping others deal with the loss of parents. Tracy Lynch, Jason's sister, has also penned a book about her brother during these years of legal battles. She aims to share the kindness and decency of Jason Corbett with the world. A notable excerpt from Tracy's book reads, "This is a story of survival that is hard to put into words. The bravery of 8-year-old Jennifer Schuett is beyond measure, and her actions in critical circumstances are remarkable. It's a rare case where the victim aided in apprehending her attacker. Despite losing her ability to speak due to a horrific injury, Jennifer survived, retaining every detail. Over 19 years, she relentlessly continued to pursue her own case, and in the end, she got her way. Yes. No. Jennifer Schuett, an 8-year-old schoolgirl, had recently finished school. She lived with her single mother, Elaine, who did everything possible to ensure her daughter's happiness and well-being. Elaine worked multiple jobs to support the family and provide Jennifer with a joyful childhood. Surrounded by such love and care, Jennifer blossomed into a lively and cheerful child, embracing learning with enthusiasm and displaying a keen intellect and curiosity. At such a young age, children are often afraid of the dark, and Jennifer was no exception. She had a fear of the dark and frequently slept alongside her mother in the same room.
As far as I can remember, back in my childhood, I just couldn't like the dark or sleeping alone. So I found comfort in going to bed with my mom. We would all bed we had with each other.
That night, on August 9th, 2009, the mother and daughter slept in the same room. Jennifer was tossing and turning, kicking her mom in sleep, making it difficult for her to fall asleep. Unusually, at 2:30 a.m., Elaine woke up and asked Jennifer to go back to her own room for the rest of the night because she needed to get up early for work. Understandingly, Jennifer responded to her mother saying, "Just because I love you, Mom, I'm going to sleep in my own room tonight," and went to her room. Elaine would later regret this decision for a long time, but at that moment, she couldn't know what would happen next. The following morning, Elaine discovered that Jennifer was missing when she went to wake her up. She noticed that the window facing the parking lot was wide open. Elaine promptly called 911. Upon the police's arrival, she recounted that she hadn't heard any noise or screams after Jennifer went to her room. It is worth mentioning that their apartment was on the first floor, and the windows in Jennifer's room overlooked the parking lot, leading Elaine to fear that someone might have seen Jennifer and entered the room through the window. Elaine realized that their apartment was not the ideal living situation for her and her young daughter, but it was the best they could afford at the time. Nevertheless, Elaine's parents decided to help her and their granddaughter with a new place to live. They purchased a small house nearby and renovated it. Jennifer and her mother were supposed to move there in a few months, and they had been there the day before Jennifer went missing. They were working in the garden, where Jennifer was bitten by mosquitoes, which prevented her from sleeping peacefully that night. After her daughter's disappearance, Elaine was devastated. She said that Jennifer was all she had and pleaded for her return. The police worked tirelessly to locate her. Luckily, Elaine didn't have to wait long for news. Around 6:30 p.m. that same day, the police received a call from parents whose children were playing in a field and accidentally stumbled upon something. To their horror, they realized it was the body of a young girl. Upon arriving at the scene, the police found the body of 8-year-old Jennifer Schuett lying in the middle of the field, 5 kilometers from her home. Jennifer's condition was grave, but she was still breathing. Jennifer's condition was grave. Her throat had been cut from ear to ear. The main life-threatening injury for Jennifer was a wide wound on her throat, which caused her to lose a lot of blood and made her extremely pale and weak. Jennifer was taken to the hospital in critical condition, where doctors fought to save her life. When I first saw Jennifer in the emergency room, she was a fairly small 8-year-old, very pale, covered with ant bites and scratches on her back. She couldn't make any sounds because of the injury that she had to her neck. Fortunately, after the operation, Jennifer's condition stabilized and the bleeding stopped. We completed her surgery. Her airway is stable. She's not bleeding. So we're very hopeful about her survival. When she regained consciousness after the surgery, her behavior underwent a sudden change. It turned out that she was afraid of all men.
I was kind of a hard patient to deal with because I had a lot of nail doctors and I was scared of males.
Additionally, the Dickinson Police Department deployed a whole team to guard her hospital room. Throughout this time, Jennifer was in a constant state of panic. She even hit a doctor in the stomach when he tried to approach her. Elaine tried to reassure her daughter, explaining that all these people were there to care for her and help her. However, Jennifer didn't trust anyone. Her behavior became more understandable when she finally revealed what had happened to her that night.
We knew that we had a survivor that couldn't speak. The challenges were to extract information from her. Now we're talking about an 8-year-old. It was difficult.
Jennifer could not directly inform the investigator of anything. To obtain any information, the detectives gave her a notebook and several pens, asking her to answer questions in writing. Due to her fear of men, Jennifer wrote notes to her mother, who then passed them to the officer. Jennifer's responses were surprisingly precise, detailing the events accurately. Despite being only 8 years old, she displayed remarkable intelligence for her age. She started by going into her room, turning on the light, and picking up a book to read, hoping it would help her sleep, which it did. Jennifer fell asleep. The next thing she knew, a stranger was carrying her out of the house.
He was running with me, carrying me down the sidewalk, and I immediately tried to scream that he covered my nose and mouth.
Afterward, he placed Jennifer in the car, claiming to be an undercover police officer. She later confessed that she immediately felt that something was wrong. Looking around, she saw her mother's car in the parking lot, so she was confused about where they were going and why. On the one hand, she knew that the police were good guys, but on the other hand, her mother had taught her not to trust strangers.
As a child, I wanted to believe him, but the part of me that had just learned about strangers in school, the part of me that was scared of the dark, knew that there was something really wrong here.
As they passed her grandparents' house, Jennifer told the stranger that he could drop her off at their house, to which he replied, "I can't because they're not home." And then she realized he was lying because their car was in the driveway. Later, the man stopped near Jennifer's school, about 3 kilometers from her home. He then said to watch the moon carefully. When it changed color, her mother would come for her.
I remember anxiously waiting for the headlights, but they never came. I think that at that point he was trying to psych himself up for what he really intended to do.
5 minutes passed, and the stranger said, "Well, your mom's not coming, so we need to go further." They drove a few more blocks to a dead-end street where the strangers stopped the car. Jennifer tried once again to make sure he was a real policeman.
I was interrogating him. I was wanting him to prove to me that he was a police officer. I wanted to know, where's your gun, where's your badge? He told me once back that his gun was in the back seat.
Jennifer turned around to search for it, and at that moment, the suspicious policeman took off her underwear. Jennifer is unsure of how long she was in the stranger's grip because she blacked out. She first regained consciousness when he was dragging her through the field by her ankles. Despite the excruciating pain from twigs and stones digging into her back, Jennifer pretended to be dead and stayed silent, realizing this was her chance to survive. He let go of her feet and left her in the field. Jennifer only heard him walking away. Then she heard his car door slam and him drive away.
I realized I couldn't scream, and I couldn't figure out why. I had just enough strength to throw my right hand on top of my neck, and that's when I felt this gaping wound. And I lifted my hand and I was full of glad.
Since the exact time of Jennifer's disappearance is unknown, it is believed that she lay in the field for 12 to 14 hours. When the sun set, she saw the lights of passing cars. Nearby, she heard children's voices, and a dog approached her several times, as if trying to get the attention of its owner, but he never came. Throughout, she was bitten by fire ants, which helped her stay conscious.
Anytime I let him tell, I would be in disbelief that I hadn't died yet.
Jennifer said she wasn't afraid and had even accepted that she might not survive, but suddenly she heard children's voices nearby, and at that moment, something hit her leg. The next time Jennifer regained consciousness, she heard a police officer repeating,
"You've been found, you're gonna be okay, just please stay with me, please stay with me." And I remember being put into the life flight helicopter.
This story was very challenging for young Jennifer, as she couldn't speak and had to write everything down on paper. Moreover, her fear of men complicated the situation, so her mother asked all the questions, and Jennifer's answers were relayed to the officers who were behind the door. Incredibly, 8-year-old Jennifer even managed to get the stranger's name from him.
I just remembering his name, and so I wrote, he said his name was Dennis. I remember then that he looked griefy and like he may have had a scar or something on his face.
4 days after her disappearance, the police requested the services of forensic artist Lois Gibson, who communicated with Jennifer solely through gestures and notes. Despite these challenges, they managed to create an incredibly detailed composite sketch. It was shown to the public in hopes that someone would identify the man. Meanwhile, the police continued to comb through the crime scene and found Jennifer's clothing about half a mile away, along with a man's shirt and underwear. Although there was hope that DNA on the clothing would lead to the perpetrator, no matches were found. Jennifer's recovery was gradual. She showed remarkable resilience despite still being a child. There was a moment when she got upset over a chocolate bar she couldn't eat, screamed in frustration, and a faint sound escaped her mouth. Doctors were shocked because her vocal cords were almost severed and they never expected them to heal, but somehow they began to mend.
I like to say how to set up then.
Soon after, Jennifer was discharged from the hospital. She not only returned home, but also went back to school. After completing her schooling and college education, Jennifer decided to pursue a career as a children's librarian. However, she never forgot what happened that night. Each day felt like a hunt for the criminal.
It could be anyone. This could be our neighbor. This could be someone at the post office, someone at the grocery store. Is he watching enough? Is he going to come back and finish me off?
Fortunately, Jennifer met a guy named Jonathan, and for the first time in many years, she trusted a man and they fell in love. However, at the same time, the trail of her attacker grew colder. The chances of him being found were slim, and the case showed no progress despite being passed from one investigator to another. 18 years after that dreadful night, Jennifer received a phone call.
I got a phone call that Detective Tim Cromie would be taking over my case and he wanted to meet with me.
Tim Cromie promised to do everything possible to catch the criminal, and Jennifer believed him.
And I told her, I said, Jennifer, I will do whatever I can do in my power till the end of my career to get you the answers that you need for this case.
Tim decided to bring in FBI Special Agent Richard Renison to the case. Richard had previously worked for the Dickinson, Texas police before joining the FBI. Tim and Richard discovered the significant amount of evidence collected on the day Jennifer went missing, and immediately after she was found, with Jennifer's underwear being particularly crucial, as well as the perpetrator's shirt and underwear. They sent a DNA sample found on the clothing to Quantico, Virginia. Although detectives knew that technology had advanced significantly in 19 years, they understood that the case's age meant it would not be a priority in the lab. Often working cold cases, time is your enemy. People forget, people move away, people die. This was one of the benefits of time in our case, was the advances of technology in the DNA field. Despite a whole year passing, their work was rewarded. The man whose DNA was found at the crime scene was Dennis Earl Bradford. Who is that? The same man Jennifer had written down many years ago. It turned out that the 8-year-old girl had been incredibly accurate in her descriptions. Jennifer was 8 years old, on pain medication, couldn't speak, and hand wrote down, he said his name was Dennis. At that point, it was monumental that this girl was so accurate. Of course, later we found out how accurate she was on everything. Dennis Bradford, 39, lived in North Little Rock, Arkansas, and his DNA was logged into the national database following an assault on a woman he met at a bar in 1996. Although sentenced to 12 years in prison, he only served 4. On February 4, 2000, Dennis was conditionally released. Less than a year later, police arrested Bradford for driving under the influence less than half a mile from his home. He remarried and worked as a welder until his arrest in 2009. Tim Cromie and Richard Renison investigated the link between the suspect from North Little Rock, Arkansas, and the small town of Dickinson, Texas. It turned out that the man had been arrested in Dickinson in 1987, 3 years before Jennifer's attack. At that time, he had 2 addresses within 2 miles of Jennifer and Elaine's apartment. To confirm his identity as the kidnapper, detectives requested a 19-year-old photo from his driver's license. When they saw the picture, they were stunned. He looked like a copy of the composite sketch created with the help of 8-year-old Jennifer.
You're a cancer for sure.
Yes.
You're out because you come in contact with her.
Yes.
Told about it.
No.
I didn't tell her. Obviously, it's supposed you are, but I think you will. If you will see her, I think you need to impress her.
I really did.
I tried to. Because you are, free to want to so. You are. Oh, good. You're very bad. Yeah. Oh, wow. Well, yeah, don't let you go for it. I have great there. Oh, hurry your cards. Yeah. Bye. Oh, idea. You want me back 2 days while you're already. And yours did not.
Dennis Earl Bradford was arrested on October 19, 2009. He insisted he didn't know Jennifer, couldn't recall why he had stopped near her apartment, and couldn't comprehend why he had treated her so cruelly. Dennis also revealed an interesting detail that investigators didn't know. After the attack, he was overwhelmed with guilt, and he attempted suicide with a shotgun. Bradford wanted to pull the trigger but changed his mind. Afterward, he was admitted to the psychiatric ward, which happened to be the same hospital that Jennifer was still in. Even at that time, he was so close to her. Immediately after the interrogation, detectives informed Jennifer that the criminal they had been searching for 19 years was arrested.
When they called me that morning and told me that they really arrested this person, Dennis Earl Bradford, it was the most surreal moment of my life. Meant everything to me.
Later, Jennifer Schuett expressed her gratitude to the detectives for fulfilling their promise.
Above all, I'd like to thank the set just getting Holly, but the Dickinson Police Department, her special agent, Richard Renison with the FBI, for all of their hard work and dedication over the last year and a half. As far as Hollis from day one, never giving us all my faith, and bringing in my life to create my determination.
She also admitted her anticipation of facing Dennis Bradford in the courtroom. Since Bradford was willing to plead guilty and not drag out the trial, Jennifer was given the opportunity to select a court date. She chose August 10, the 20th anniversary of the attack.
I remember staying up late, endless nights, trying to perfect my victim impact statement, writing and erasing, and writing again and erasing again, just trying to perfect what I wanted to say. I had 19 years worth of things to say to this person.
However, it was not meant to happen. On May 10, 2010, a few months before the trial, Dennis hung himself in his jail cell. Feeling that her right to see the case through to the end had been taken away, Jennifer went to Dennis's grave and read aloud what she wanted to say in court.
Dennis Bradford, you chose the wrong little 45-pound, 8-year-old girl to try and hurt her, because for 19 years, I've thought of you every single day and helped in searching for you. In my heart, I knew you were out there. And now I know, listening to my heart all of these years and never giving up on finding you, I was right.
After finishing her speech, Jennifer turned to her husband and said, "I wonder if he heard me." At that moment, a fiery ant bit her leg. Jennifer took it as a sign from God that he had heard her loud and clear. Despite the horrific events caused by Dennis's actions, Jennifer faced yet another challenge in life. As a result of the trauma caused by Dennis, Jennifer almost lost the ability to conceive a child. However, amidst the darkness, there are shining examples of kindness, such as Dr. Craig Witz. After hearing Jennifer's story, he generously offered his services to her twice, free of charge. At the end of 2012, the couple welcomed their daughter, Jenna, and later their son, Jonah.
It's like, thanks me, who would have thought they're really my happy ending.
Although the criminal tried to silence her and take away her right to be a mother, he failed. Jennifer desires for her story to be shared, not for her own sake, but for others who have endured similar ordeals and must cope with them every day. She says, "We've gone through something in life that we can talk about, but it's worth sharing it with others to instill hope. I hope this inspires you to use your voice to help someone else," Jennifer added at the end.
I am not a victim, but instead victorious.